Good morning, Ms. Albert.
Good morning.
Ma'am, you will recall yesterday I broached the topic with you of how often you and Courtney Proctor speak to each other over the phone. Do you recall that line of questioning?
Yes.
When I asked you to describe the frequency of those phone calls, I didn't put any words in your mouth, did I? I didn't suggest how frequently they were. You came up with the word.
I don't really.
Well, let me put it this way. When I asked you how often you talked to Courtney Proctor, you could have chosen any word in the English language to answer that question, correct?
Correct.
What was the word that you chose?
Not often. I don't remember,
How about
honestly.
rarely?
Rarely. Yes.
That was your word, correct?
It could have been. I don't really recall. I don't recall.
You don't recall telling this jury yesterday that when I asked you about how often you spoke to Courtney Proctor by phone, you said rarely.
I don't remember.
What is your definition of rarely?
Not daily. Yes.
Once in a blue moon?
No.
Rarely doesn't mean to you 67 phone conversations within a 7-month period, does it?
A 67 time period in how many? 8 months?
In about 7 months, 67 times.
It's not a lot. I wouldn't think it's a lot in 7 months.
3 times in one day? Is that rarely?
No, but that wasn't every day.
Okay. When you left the stand yesterday, did you log into your account or check any bills to confirm those 67 calls?
No, I did not.
Did you speak to Mr. Lally about those 67 calls after we broke yesterday and before you took the stand today?
I don't believe so, no.
Did you call Courtney Proctor in one of those rare occasions yesterday?
No, I did not.
This morning?
No, I did not.
Were you curious as to whether or not you had actually called her those 67 times?
Objection.
Sustained.
In any case, regarding all of those 67 phone calls from February 1st until September 6th, do you maintain that during none of those calls or any portion of those calls did you and Courtney Proctor discuss the investigation into the death of John O'Keefe?
I do not remember.
Do you deny discussing that investigation?
I don't deny, but I do not remember.
All right. You admitted yesterday, after having seen the records, that you spoke with Michael Proctor's sister for 12 minutes on February 1st of 2022. Do you recall that?
I don't recall the conversation. No, I don't. It was a long time ago.
I'm sorry. I don't mean to interrupt you. Finish your answer.
I'm sorry. It was a long time ago. I just don't remember.
Okay. But my question is, after seeing the records, you saw the phone call for over 12 minutes, correct?
Correct.
You also remember that was the very day that the police arrested Karen Read for this case, correct?
Correct.
The arrest of Karen Read on February 1st was pretty big news in Massachusetts, correct?
Objection.
You had seen that arrest all over the news, correct?
Correct.
You certainly, given the day and the fact that it was February 1st and my client was arrested that day and you're talking to the lead investigator's sister, the subject of Karen Read's arrest had to have come up, right?
Objection.
Jane, ask it differently.
You certainly mentioned my client's arrest with Courtney Proctor on the very day that she was arrested and you were talking to Courtney, correct?
Correct.
Now, when we broke for the day yesterday, I had also asked you about the 3 phone calls that you had with Michael Proctor's sister on the morning of February 2nd when my client was arraigned, correct?
Correct.
You recall that her arraignment was televised publicly, correct?
Jane, ask it.
You saw her on the news being arraigned, correct?
Correct.
One of those phone calls after, strike that. With regard to the 3 phone calls before the arraignment, you knew at that time that my client had been arrested the day before, correct?
Correct.
You knew she would be arraigned in court that morning, correct?
Correct.
Certainly, when you were talking to Michael Proctor's sister on February 2nd, before her 9 o'clock arraignment, you were discussing the 9 o'clock arraignment, correct?
Can you repeat the end of that, please?
On February 2nd, the day that my client was scheduled to be arraigned in Stoughton District Court, we're talking about the 3 phone calls that you made to Michael Proctor's sister before that arraignment that very day. My question is, certainly, you were discussing the fact that she was about to be arraigned, correct?
Objection.
Jane, ask it differently, Mr.
Did the subject of Karen Read's arraignment come up in any of those 3 calls on February 2nd, the day she was going to be arraigned, before her arraignment?
I don't remember exactly.
What about the 20-minute phone call that you had with Courtney Proctor at 10:58 a.m. that same day after my client was arraigned? Did you discuss the arraignment that had just happened?
I do not remember.
But already testified that by 2022, you were no longer babysitting for Courtney Proctor's kids, correct?
I wasn't babysitting regularly like I was before.
So is it your testimony that you happened to be talking about babysitting on February 2nd for 27 minutes, the same day that my client was arraigned in Stoughton District Court?
I don't remember what I was talking about. It could have been about the kids. It could have been about anything. I don't remember.
Sure. Certainly, it could have been about the publicly televised arraignment that had just occurred, correct?
Objection.
I'll allow this and then let's move away from this, okay? Can you answer that?
Yes, it could have been. Yes.
Did you tell Courtney Proctor during any of these 67 phone calls that you were a witness in her brother's case?
I don't remember.
Okay. Ms. Albert, you were at the waterfall on the night of January 28th, correct?
Yes.
You also went to 34 Fairview on the morning of January 29th.
Yes.
Yet, as of the date of these phone calls that we've discussed so far, the February 1st and the February 2nd, multiple phone calls, Trooper Proctor still had not interviewed you, correct?
Correct.
You were finally interviewed by Trooper Proctor on February 10th, about 13 days after John O'Keefe was found dead on Brian Albert, correct?
Correct.
You told Courtney Proctor that you were nervous to speak to her brother, Trooper Proctor, about this case. Do you remember that?
I do not remember those exact words, no.
But you were nervous to speak to him, correct?
Of course, I was nervous in general for a police interview. I don't know someone who wouldn't be.
Were you worried that one of Trooper Proctor's colleagues might ask to speak to your son, Colin, about what had happened on the 28th and the 29th?
Objection.
Was I nervous they would ask my son?
Yeah, were you nervous that one of the investigators in this case might approach your son to ask him about his whereabouts?
No.
All right. In any case, you were interviewed at 5:30 p.m. on February 10th, correct?
Correct.
Where did that interview take place?
At my home in Canton.
Who was present for that interview?
Me, my husband, Trooper Proctor, and Trooper Bukaki.
Michael Proctor agreed to interview you and your husband together, correct?
Objection.
You and your husband were interviewed together, correct?
Correct.
Did either of these troopers, including Michael Proctor, suggest that maybe the two of you should be separately interviewed?
I don't recall. I don't
Did
remember.
the interview take place within your home?
In my family room?
Were you sitting on couches?
Yes.
You're comfortable?
Yes.
You were not in a police interrogation room, correct?
No, I was not.
It wasn't particularly lengthy, correct?
What do you define lengthily? I don't recall. I don't remember how long it was exactly.
It didn't go into the evening, correct? Then Michael Proctor and the other trooper left, correct?
Correct.
Then at 6:17 p.m. that same night, shortly after you had been interviewed, you called Michael Proctor's personal cell phone number, correct?
I don't remember.
You didn't bring your cheaters today. Oh, you did? Good. Okay. May I approach you, Ron?
Yes.
This is the same. I'm going to hand you one document. There's an orange sticky on it that you can ignore.
Okay.
But right above the orange sticky, there's a date of February 10th. That's what I'm directing your attention. You could look at those 2 phone calls, ma'am, and look up at me when you're done, if I may approach. Did that refresh your memory about those 2 phone calls on February 10th?
I just read them, but I don't remember.
Okay. You called Trooper Proctor at 6:17 p.m., and it appears to be a 5-second phone call. Did you see that?
Objection, Your Honor.
Do you recall that Trooper Proctor called you back that same day at 6:21 p.m. and that you spoke for about 4 minutes?
Objection, Your
Do you deny speaking to Trooper Proctor for 4 minutes when he called you from his personal cell phone on February 10th of 2022 after you had been interviewed that day?
No, I don't deny it, but I don't remember it.
When did you get his personal cell phone number?
Don't remember.
Years ago?
Sure, yes.
Because you've known that family for a long time.
Yes, I have.
As you testify here today, you can't remember what that phone call would have been about, correct?
No, I do not remember.
Okay. I'd like to contrast your relationship with Karen Read versus your relationships with Jennifer McCabe and Courtney Proctor. You would agree with me, and I think you testified yesterday, that Jennifer McCabe is one of your best friends.
Correct.
You call her Jen, correct?
Yes.
Courtney Proctor is also one of your best friends, correct?
She's not one of my best friends, no. She's a good friend. She's not one of my best friends, no. She's my sister's best friend.
Gotcha. Okay, so your sister.
My sister Jillian, yes.
Jillian is best friends with Courtney Proctor, and you're close friends with her, but not best friends.
Correct.
But you really only knew Karen Read as John O'Keefe's girlfriend, correct?
Correct.
She was just an acquaintance of yours.
Yes.
There are no photos of you in a hot tub together, right? You and Karen Read?
No.
There are no photos of you with your arms around each other at the beach, correct?
No.
You've never been to a baby shower with Karen Read, correct?
Objection, Your Honor.
Jane.
You didn't have any contact with Karen Read while you were growing up, correct?
No.
Karen Read was definitely not from Canton, correct?
Objection, Your Honor.
I'll allow this and then you can move.
No, she was not.
One more question. She was an outsider, correct, to Canton?
She didn't live in Canton.
All right. But after she started dating John, you would see her driving in and out of the street, correct?
Yes.
You'd see her taking groceries in, correct?
Yes.
Because you were neighbors with John.
Yes.
It was the fact that you'd see her around taking groceries in and out of the house and being outside with the kids that led you to believe that she was not only connected to John, but also to his house on Meadows Ave, correct?
Yes.
You would see her interacting with the kids outside, correct?
Yes.
She would be participating in family-type activities with the kids outside.
Yes.
You'd see her enough that you assumed that she was living there, correct?
Yes.
I believe you stated that you had known her or seen her for maybe about a year and a half or so. Is that a good estimate?
Yes.
And in all the time that you saw her in the neighborhood or had any contact with her and John, you never saw the two of them fight or argue, correct?
No.
You never heard them fight or argue, correct?
No.
You had been out with them in a group setting a handful of times, correct?
Just a couple of times.
During those times, they always appeared to get along, correct?
Yes.
You knew of no problems in their relationship, correct?
No.
You were particularly impressed with the time Karen spent with John's adopted children.
Objection.
Can you repeat that once more, please?
You were impressed with the amount of time that Karen spent with John.
I didn't know the exact really amount of time. She was there a lot. Yes, she was. So yes, I would assume that she spent a lot of time with them. Yes.
Now, on Friday, January 28th, you had plans with your sister-in-law, Nicole, correct? You are close with Nicole.
Yes, I am.
You picked her up at her home in your car.
Yes.
You drove her to the waterfall, correct?
Correct.
The two of you went for dinner there.
Yes.
Your husband, Chris, came later.
Yes.
Brian Higgins came later.
Yes.
You knew Brian Higgins, correct?
Yes.
Jane, I want to stop you for 1
Yes.
second.
I believe you testified that you knew Brian Higgins at that time, correct?
Yes.
How did you know him?
He is a friend of my brother-in-law.
Your brother-in-law would be Brian Albert, correct?
Yes.
By the way, when I just asked you that question about how you knew Brian Higgins and what his relationship was to Brian Albert, you didn't hesitate to say that they were friends, correct?
Correct.
It was very clear that they were friends, correct?
Correct.
In fact, the two of them arrived at the bar together, correct?
Yes.
It didn't surprise you to see the two of them together, correct?
No.
Karen and John came sometime after that.
I believe shortly after that. Yes.
They walked over to your table.
Yes.
And John came up from behind you and in a joking way dug his finger into your shoulder,
Correct. Yes.
essentially said, "What's up?" That was about it. He went on.
He said, "What's up?" and made a joke.
The joke was, given the fact that you and your husband moved from the neighborhood, they decided to hold a block party. Correct?
Yes.
John was the same jokester he always was, correct?
Correct. Yes.
You had some contact with Karen while you were at the bar before you had to leave because of the migraine, correct?
Correct.
She was just very bubbly that night, correct?
Correct.
That's just her personality as far as you could see, correct?
As far as I knew, yes.
You didn't know her that well, but that's how she always was, correct?
Correct.
You left the waterfall at around 11 o'clock, your best memory?
A little after 11.
There was a particularly bad migraine that night.
Yes.
The loud music didn't help you out at all.
Not at all.
You drove home?
Yes.
Now, when you got home, your son Colin was not there, correct?
Correct.
He was not out with you at the waterfall.
Correct.
He was out that night, correct?
Yes.
You knew that he stops by your sister-in-law Nicole's house quite a bit, correct? He's very close to Nicole and Brian's kids, correct?
Correct.
He's also very close to his aunt and uncle, Brian Albert and Nicole. Testified on direct examination that Chris came home at 12:10 a.m. on January 29th.
That's what time I believe he did. Yes.
That 12:10 a.m. time, did you discuss that precise time with anybody prior to taking the stand yesterday?
No,
Was that coordinated with anybody such that your husband and you gave the same time of 12:10 a.m.?
no.
With the court's permission, I'd like to play the video. I think it's agreed, just that portion. To allow my colleagues some time to find this, and I'll move on with my questioning, and we can have the lights on. Now, I believe you've testified that the waterfall is very close to D&E Pizza, correct?
Correct.
But your house on Maple Street is about a half mile away from the waterfall. Would you agree with that?
About that, yes. Maybe a little less, but about that.
All right. Would you agree it's a 7 or 8 minute walk home from the waterfall if you're walking? I realize you were driving, but if somebody were walking, it would be about 7 or 8 minutes?
Maybe a minute or two less.
Okay. So you would say 6 or 7 minutes would be a better estimate to cover that half mile?
Depends on how fast you walk, yes.
It was snowing that night, correct?
Correct.
The ground was a little bit slippery.
Yes.
If I could have the lights dimmed again. This is the exhibit I'd like to show you, ma'am. If you can pause for 1 second. Do you recognize what's depicted in that video? That appear to be the waterfall?
Yes.
Okay. Do you see the time? Do you see the time, 12:13 a.m.?
Yes.
Okay, if you can run that, Mr. Bates, pause it there. I am going to direct your, do you see
Yes.
you see the timestamp up the top, correct?
Yes.
Between those two markers on the video, you're going to see somebody walking by. I'd ask you to pay attention for the next 6 seconds or so. Stop. Do you recognize that person?
Yes, I believe it's my husband.
You can run that? Stop. Okay. Would you agree with me that your husband left the waterfall at about 12:13 and 46 seconds?
Yes, that's what it says on the screen.
Okay. So it was closer to 14 than to 2:10. Would you agree with that?
12:14, you mean? Two?
You know what? You're right. 12:14 then 12:10.
Yes, that's what I'm seeing.
Thank you. So if he's leaving at around 12:14, and by your testimony, it would have taken him he was walking home. You knew that, correct?
Yes,
He didn't have a car that night.
he did not.
If it took him 6 or 7 minutes to get home, and by the way, let me strike that question. You had said it takes 6 or 7 minutes. Did you factor in the fact that of the weather that night for your estimate about a 6 or 7 minute walk?
Objection.
Can you answer that question? Is that what you said?
Yes, I didn't factor in the, I don't know.
All right, so your testimony would be, you don't know if it would have taken him a little bit longer or.
Everyone walks at a different pace.
Right, but whatever pace they walk at, given what you saw of the weather that night, is it your testimony that maybe it would have taken a little bit longer than the estimate?
Could have.
Okay, but let's leave it at 6 or 7 minutes. That puts your husband coming home at around 12:20 or 12:21, correct?
Correct.
All right. That 10 estimate that you had, you made that estimate before having the benefit of the video, correct?
Correct.
Now, where were you within the house when your husband came home?
In my room, stairs in my bedroom.
All right, and you share a bedroom with your husband.
Yes,
When was the first time that you saw him within the house?
he came up to the bedroom.
Okay, so you were in the bedroom and you see him appear in the bedroom.
Correct.
Did you hear the door open way down on the first floor?
Yes,
Okay. It would have taken him maybe about a minute to get upstairs. It wasn't very long?
it wouldn't be very long, no.
Okay. When he got upstairs, you noticed that he was in wet clothing, correct?
Yes,
He appeared to be cold.
yes,
He got undressed, correct?
yes.
Did he brush his teeth before bed?
I think he got right into bed.
Okay, so you didn't see him brush his teeth or wash up.
No,
Were you in the bed when he came into the bed to go to sleep?
I was sitting up in bed, yes.
Were you reading or watching TV?
I was just sitting up in bed praying for my headache to go away.
Oh, okay. The migraine was still really
Yes.
bothering you. You were suffering at that point.
Suffering? I had a headache.
Yeah, but a migraine headache, I would
Yeah.
imagine.
It was a headache, but I took medicine and I was waiting for it to get
Waiting
better.
for it to kick in.
Yes,
Okay, that's what you were concentrating on. It's really hard to read or watch TV or concentrate on anything when you have a migraine, right?
okay, yes,
Now, you would agree with me that your husband Chris was asleep when Colin came home, correct?
correct,
As a mother, you couldn't have gone to sleep until you knew your kids were home, correct?
correct,
Colin was the remaining child who was out there. When he came home, that would given you license to go to sleep.
yes,
Now, at the time that Colin came home with Chris sleeping, it's fair to say this was just an ordinary weekend night, correct?
How do you?
In other words, you didn't know that anything tragic had occurred or was alleged to have occurred, correct?
Correct.
So it wasn't like you were paying attention to the clock at that point, recording your memories as best you could because you knew you'd be testifying later, correct?
Correct.
Which also explains the 12:10 estimate, right? You're being asked about times that things occurred, and it was just an ordinary day. So it's difficult to pinpoint times, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now, directing your attention to the next morning, you missed a phone call from your best friend, Jennifer McCabe, correct?
Correct.
You believe that phone call, I think according to your memory, yesterday came in at 5:55 p.m., correct? I'm sorry, 5:55 a.m., correct?
Correct.
That was the time that you gave Mr. Lally when he asked you the question on direct examination, correct?
Correct.
You were able to recall that time nearly 2 years later, correct?
Yes.
But regarding the 67 phone calls between you and Courtney Proctor that happened after that, you're not able to recall any of those, correct?
I just don't remember them.
All right. In any case, January 29th was your nephew, Brian Albert Jr.'s birthday, correct?
Yes.
That's why you went to 34 Fairview at 8:30 in the morning, correct?
Yes.
When you pulled into the driveway, there was nothing unusual to you, correct?
Correct.
This was just your brother-in-law, Brian, and your sister-in-law, Nicole's house with snow around, correct?
Yes.
There were no police on scene.
No.
There was no tent protecting the front lawn, correct?
Correct.
No crime scene tape stapled anywhere or taped anywhere, correct?
Correct.
Nobody appeared to be standing guard over the front yard, correct?
Correct.
You didn't see any shard of glass, right?
No, I did not.
You didn't see 45 pieces of taillight strewn about the lawn, correct?
Correct.
In fact, you didn't see any pieces of taillight, correct?
I don't recall seeing anything.
You didn't suspect that 34 Fairview was a crime scene, correct?
Objection.
Abstained.
There was nothing that prevented you from walking all over that front lawn, correct?
Correct.
It was still snowing out?
Yes.
Brian Albert, when you approached the house, he opened the door, correct?
I approached the car, not the house.
Oh, okay. You approached, whose car was it?
My nephew Brian's.
Brian?
In the driveway. Yes.
All right. And Brian Albert opened the door of the house.
The side door of the home. Yes.
All right. Can I have Exhibit 8, please, with the court's permission?
Yes.
Could we zoom in just a little bit? That's good. I am so bad at this stuff. Jeez. Oh, thank you. You're welcome. All right. That I'm highlighting now is the front door to the house, correct?
Yes.
If we move along Exhibit 8 to the right, is that the side door?
Yes.
That's the door that Brian Albert appeared from?
Yes.
You were able to see him from the outside of the house, correct?
Yes.
You were over to this area?
Yes.
Do you recall, is it one of those two cars that's in Exhibit 8 that you approached with the Dunkin' Donuts?
I can't make out what the cars are.
Okay, but it was either one of those two cars or a car that was parked in one of those two places.
Yes.
All right. Then did you go in that side door to go into the house?
Yes.
Fair to say that family has lived there for quite a while, correct?
Yes.
You knew that prior to Brian Albert and, I'm sorry. That's really bad form to block the jury. I am so sorry. It's good I didn't trip. The door that is the front door, having been familiar with that house for a long time, you've gone in that front door before, correct?
Yes.
You know that when you go in the front door of that house, you come into a little foyer area, correct?
Correct.
And almost within arm's distance to the left is the door to the basement, correct?
Walking in the front door, arm's distance to the left.
Yes. So in other words, you walk into the house,
Yep.
and the door to the basement, going down to the basement, is right there on the left, correct?
That's incorrect. To the left is a library.
Where is the door to the basement?
You walk in the front door, you step to the right, walk a few steps towards the kitchen. The basement door is on the left before you enter the kitchen.
But the kitchen's off to the left, correct?
No, when you walk in the front door, the library is on the left. There's another room on the left.
Okay.
So you walk in, you immediately see a staircase in front of you. To the left is the library.
Right.
If you go to the right,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
if you go to the right, you can go into the part of the kitchen where the kitchen table is, or you can not go to the right. You can walk straight. As you're walking, there's a door on the left, and that's where the basement door is.
Okay, so I think we're getting to what I was getting at. If you walk straight ahead, there's a door to the left that goes down to the basement, correct?
Correct, yes.
We can have the left. When you were walking toward that side door, you didn't see any emergency or police vehicles outside, correct?
No, I did not.
And you didn't see any first responders other than Brian Albert, correct?
Correct,
There were no lights flashing outside the house, correct?
correct,
Inside, you saw Nicole Albert,
yes,
Brian Albert,
yes,
Jennifer McCabe,
yes,
Matt McCabe,
yes,
Brian Higgins, correct?
yes.
How long did you spend at the house that morning?
I don't remember exactly, maybe a half hour, 45 minutes. I don't remember exactly.
The 7 of you were discussing what had happened, correct?
Yes,
At some point, it was decided that Jennifer McCabe should contact Michael Lank of the Canton Police, correct?
Objection.
I'll if this witness knows independently.
can you repeat that once more, please?
At some point, it was decided among the 7 of you that Jennifer McCabe should contact Michael Lank of the Canton Police Department.
I don't remember who exactly Jennifer decided. Yeah, I don't remember exactly the discussion.
You knew Michael Lank, correct?
Yes,
At 8:53 a.m., you sent to Jennifer McCabe Michael Lank's personal cell phone number, correct?
correct.
Did you then see Jennifer McCabe delete that text message from you?
Objection.
You were contacted by the Massachusetts State Police this year about your phone, correct?
Correct.
They left you a voicemail on March 21st of 2024?
The state police
Yes.
about my telephone?
They left you a voicemail on March 2024. You've had contact with the state police this year.
Yes,
They left you a second voicemail on March 20th and then called you again on March 28th.
yes,
You told them that you were sick and you would speak to them on April 1st, correct?
correct.
And the state police called you on April 1st, but you did not pick up. Do you recall that?
I do not.
They called you again that same day and you didn't respond, correct?
I don't recall.
But you did learn that they had called your husband on April 1st looking for you, correct?
I don't recall.
All right. After speaking with your husband, you texted the Massachusetts State Police on April 1st, correct?
I think around that, I don't know the exact date.
All right. And you finally met with the Massachusetts State Police on April 3rd of 2024, correct?
I would assume, I don't know the exact date, but yes.
During that meeting, the state police looked through your phone for contact that you would have had with Michael Proctor, correct?
Correct.
Did they seize your phone?
No, they did not.
Did they tell you that they had a search warrant for your phone?
No, they did not.
Did they take it back saying that they had to give it to some experts to do an extraction?
Objection.
Abstain.
They just looked through it after you handed it to them, correct?
Correct.
Then they gave it back.
Yes,
Now, with regard to your contact with Karen on January, it was clear to you that Karen did not appear to be under the influence, correct?
correct.
You didn't see her stumbling, correct?
Correct.
You didn't see her swaying.
Correct.
She was not unbalanced.
No,
She was not slurring her words.
no,
She was not talking gibberish.
no.
She was engaging in normal conversation.
Yes,
She held the conversation perfectly fine.
yes,
She appeared to be under control, correct?
yes.
She was affectionate with John that night.
Objection.
I didn't come in contact with them like that.
The two of them certainly were not arguing.
No, not that I saw.
You didn't see any tension between them, correct?
No,
Given your family's connection to law enforcement, you would not knowingly let someone drive a car if they were under the influence, correct?
Objection.
Everyone appeared to be having a good time that, correct?
yes.
That included John and Karen from what you could see, correct?
For the 10, 15 minutes I was there, yes.
Now, after you left the waterfall, it's fair to say that you didn't know precisely where your son Colin was that night.
I knew where he was.
Where was he?
He was at his friend Michael Leonetti's. He left Michael Leonetti's to stop to say happy birthday to my nephew Brian at 34 Fairview Road.
You learned that from him, correct?
Yes,
So you had learned that Colin was at 34 Fairview on January 29th of 2022, correct?
January Friday.
So is it your testimony that you know that Colin left on Friday night as opposed to after midnight on January 29th?
I don't understand what you're asking.
What just occurred is I asked you whether you knew that your son Colin was at your sister-in-law Nicole's and your brother-in-law Brian Albert's house on January 29th, and you just corrected.
I'm sorry. It was after. I'm sorry. It was after midnight. So I got confused. I apologize.
Not a problem. So the answer to my question is, you learned that he was there on January 29th, correct?
Yes, after midnight.
You now know that is the same house outside which John O'Keefe was found dead that morning, correct?
Yes, I do.
One last question. You were interviewed by Trooper Proctor, and it's fair to say you never told him that Colin was there then.
I don't recall my interview.
I have no further questions. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Lally.
Just briefly on.
Morning.
Now, with reference to, you were asking a question about 67 calls over a period from February to,
Correct.
that's about 7 months, is that right?
Yes.
Roughly about 210 days or so?
Yes.
Do you have other friends? At no point in time did you speak to Ms. Proctor that you would call about this case or talk to outside of that interview?
Correct.
In the interview that you had with Trooper Proctor, there was another trooper, correct?
Yes.
You would just ask some questions about meeting with some other troopers this year in 2024, correct?
Correct.
Okay, fair to say none of those troopers was Trooper Proctor, correct?
Correct.
It also wasn't the trooper that was with Trooper Proctor when you spoke to him.
Correct.
They asked you questions. You had at least 2 interviews with them. Is that correct?
Correct.
You voluntarily went to those interviews.
Yes.
You answered their questions.
Yes.
They asked for your phone.
Yes. When I was sitting there, they looked at my phone. Yes.
So they asked for your phone. You provided your phone.
Yes.
Voluntarily. Nobody threatened you with a search warrant or anything like that.
No.
You were asked some questions about timing, and I promise there's no math that I'm asking in this, but you've had to walk outside when it's cold outside, correct?
Yes.
You tend to walk faster or slower when it's cold outside?
Faster. Me personally.
When you went over to your in-laws' house on the morning of January 29th to drop off donuts for your nephew, you weren't expecting to go inside, correct?
Correct.
You weren't expecting to be standing around talking to people about a friend of yours potentially having died at that point.
No.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Could you please state your name and spell your last name?
My name's Nicole Albert, Albert.
And where do you live? About how long have you lived in Norwood?
About a year.
Prior to moving to Norwood, where did you live? Where did you live prior?
Canton.
How long had you lived in Canton?
My whole life.
Now, the specific address, where did you live in Canton prior to your move to Norwood?
34 Fairview Road.
How long did you live at that house?
About 12 years.
Are you married, ma'am?
Yes.
What's your husband?
Brian Albert.
Do you work?
He's retired from the Boston Police.
About how long was he in office?
About 30 years.
Do you have children?
Yes, we have 5.
How old are your 5?
Daughter's 28, and then I have a son who's 25. I have another son who's actually 23 today. And I have twins, a boy and a girl who are 20.
Your oldest daughter, what's her
Caitlin.
name? Son, what is it?
Brian Jr.
Brian Jr., does he live with you currently? Your other children, do they live with you as well?
My oldest daughter lives with her boyfriend in Easton. And my son Brendan lives with us. He's just finishing up college, so he's graduating this month from college, so he's back with us. My twin daughter, goes to college, so she's home now for the summer, but she has an apartment in Bridgewater. And then the twin boy is in the military,
Which branch?
the Marine Corps.
Now, I could turn your attention to January 28th, 2020. Call that day? Call what day of the week?
The Friday.
At the time of January 28th,
Yes, I've been a part-time lunch lady for about 9 years.
you've since retired, is that correct?
I'm sorry.
You've since retired from that?
I haven't retired. I just didn't go back this past year, but
And around that date of, so January 28th, 2022, what, if any, significance was the next day of January?
January 29th was my son Brian Jr.'s 23rd birthday.
Over the course of that week leading up into the weekend, what, if any, plans did you make with reference to your...
He had mentioned he was going to get together with some friends on the Saturday night, the 29th, for his birthday. And I had said, okay, maybe Friday night, if anyone's around, any of our aunts or uncles or anyone, maybe we'll take you out just local for some apps and drinks or something.
Coming up to that day,
The forecast was saying a big snowstorm was coming in, and it looked like it was going to be late Friday into all day Saturday. So I had said to my son, obviously, doesn't seem like anyone will be able to go out on Saturday night. Why don't you just do something with your friends Friday night? Yeah, I had just mentioned to my daughter Caitlin and my sister-in-law Julie, and just had mentioned it to them about possibly getting together Friday.
just say your sister-in-law, she's related,
She's my husband's brother, Chris's wife.
and your husband has a number.
Yes, he's the oldest of 7.
And yourself and Julie Albert, you guys are friends?
Yes, we're very close.
And also, just one last question, leading up through the course of that week, where did your husband Brian go?
Last minute, I believe it was Thursday of that week, he went to New York for a funeral.
And you know who,
It was for a New York police officer who had just been killed in the line of duty.
do you recall how you got there? Was
I
the New York?
believe he may have flown Thursday to New York. Then the plan was to fly back Saturday, but that changed with the weather and he ended up, they didn't want to get stuck there. So after the funeral Friday morning, they drove home. A friend of his had driven, so he got a ride back with them on Friday.
Only if, but as far as that friend that he drove back with,
Friend who I believe had the truck there and drove was Brian Higgins.
someone that you were familiar with prior to that date in January.
Yes, he was a friend of my husband's.
Now, on that evening of the 20th, can you explain to the jury how it was that where did you decide to go with your daughter and your sister-in-law?
We just decided to go to Waterfall, a local place 5-10 minutes down the road from our house. My sister-in-law Julie picked me up at my house maybe 7:30, 7:45, and we went to the Waterfall, and I believe my daughter and her boyfriend Tristan were already inside at a table.
When your sister Julie came to pick you up the house, in addition to yourself and your son Brian Jr., who, if anyone else, were any of his friends there at that
I
time?
believe 2 girlfriends may have already had come, and they were just sitting in the kitchen when I left.
And so you go out to the waterfall, you get to the waterfall where
We came in, walked in, I believe to the left, there was just some small tables, and I think Caitlin and Tristan were already sitting there, so we sat down at the table and we ordered food and just hung out for a little bit, had food and some drinks.
as far as drinks were concerned, do you recall drinking that night?
I was probably drinking White Claw.
Now, later on in the evening, was there any sort of live entertainment there?
Yes, after we ate, my daughter's boyfriend Tristan left shortly after because he was going to be going out shoveling, working with a plow guy. So he was planned to go home and just sleep, take a nap, because he was going to have to get up like in the middle of the night to go out and do that. So he had left. So it was just me, Julie, and Caitlin. At one point, the waitress had said, "Oh, a band's going to be setting up where you're sitting. Can I move you?" So she just moved us over to a high top table.
And after you were moved over to the, with anyone else in,
Shortly after, I believe my sister Jennifer and her husband Matt came in, I had texted her just saying I was there if she was interested to come by. I think she said she was somewhere else. Did I want to come there? I said, "No, I'm already situated. The band's going to play. I'm just going to stay here." So she said, "Okay, maybe we'll come there." So maybe 9-ish, she came in with another couple. I believe they had been at a basketball game, their daughter's basketball game. So she came in with them.
and again, just to be clear, when you say your sister Jen and her husband Matt, she's your younger sister, is that correct?
Yes.
Now, as far as after they came in, who, if anyone else, came in and joined your group?
Shortly after that, I believe Julie's husband, Chris, came in. He worked up the street at his pizza shop. I believe shortly after 9:30, he came down, he came in. And then in the meantime, my husband was getting close to being back to the area from driving back from New York. So I had texted him and said, "Hey, me and Katie and whoever else are here, if you want to come by." He was like, "Oh, I'm tired. It's been a long day." I just pushed him a little. "Oh, Katie's here. Just come. She wants to see you." So he's like, "All right, maybe I'll pop in." I believe after, so it was Jen and Matt and the other couple. And then Chris came in. And then I believe maybe around Brian came in.
Brian came in.
Shortly after, maybe 10:30, his friend Brian Higgins had come in.
Your husband Brian and Brian Higgs separately about a half.
I think so, yes.
Following that, if anyone else came into the establishment and joined.
A little bit later, I think approximately, John walked in with his girlfriend,
When you,
John O'Keefe.
how did you or did you know John O'Keefe prior to that night?
I didn't know him that well. I think I had only met him once, maybe twice through my sister. Brief interaction. I think when he first walked in, actually, I didn't recognize him. I think I said to someone, "Oh, who's that?" Because they were walking towards our table. And they said, "Oh, that's John O'Keefe." I said, "Oh." They came in and they just went to the end of the table where my sister Jennifer and Matt and Chris and Julie were, because they knew them. I had never met Karen and I'd only met John once or twice. So they just went to the other end of the table where Jen and Matt were, who they know, and Chris and Julie, who John had been neighbors with for a couple of years. So they were all just at that end talking.
Just to be clear, as far as the sister that you knew,
Yes, Jennifer.
as far as you referenced his girlfriend, had you ever met his girlfriend before that night?
No.
Had you ever, but you had never met Karen Read prior to that night, as
No.
far as you recall?
Nope.
At any point in time, did you have any interaction, or what, if any, interaction did you have with either Mr. O'Keefe or Mr.
At one point, John walked towards me and my daughter at the table and said, "Hey, I'm going up to the bar. Do you guys need a drink or anything?" We said, "No, thank you." I think he then stopped and spoke with my husband for a minute, probably was asking him the same thing. Then John went back up to the bar and then he went back down to, where he'd been standing. And that was the only interaction I had with him.
As far as your understanding,
Yes, I knew he was a Boston policeman.
was he somebody, if you know, that worked with your husband?
No, I don't believe he ever worked with my husband. I don't believe they ever crossed paths at work. I think they were in different areas of the job.
Fair to say the Boston Police Department is a relatively large department, correct?
Yeah, it's like 3,000.
Now, with reference to Miss Reed, what, if any, interaction did you have with her that night?
I had none. I don't believe we spoke or we were introduced or anything. I don't think we spoke at all.
Now, turning back to Mr. O'Keefe just for a second, if anything you're wearing as far as clothing was concerned during your interaction,
I believe he had a hat on, some sort of just sweatshirt, jeans, and sneakers.
at any point in time that you saw him or was you, did you see any sort of?
No,
And as far as his clothing was concerned, did you observe it to have any sort of tears in it or anything like that?
no,
And as far as his face was concerned, or any sort of outward part of his body, did you observe, or what, if anything, did you observe with regard to injuries on him or anything like that?
nothing like that.
Now, as far as your home was concerned, was that somewhere that either Mr. O'Keefe or Ms. Reed had ever been to?
No.
Over the course of the evening, what, if any, discussion was there?
Well, after the band wrapped up, I was getting ready to leave and I just leaned over to my sister Jennifer and said, "Hey, Brian Jr.'s at the house. I think he just has two friends there. He's going to be turning 23 at midnight. If on your way home you wanted to swing by and say happy birthday. If you want to do that, come by and do that." She was like, "Okay." And then I was just gathering up my stuff and I got ready to leave. It may have been mentioned at the table, but I had no idea if anyone else was interested in doing that or wanted to do it. I had just said it to my sister.
If anybody else had wanted to,
Oh, no, I would have no problem if anyone sitting with us had come.
as far as you knew, you just communicated that to your sister Jennifer. And
Yes,
when you say the band was wrapping up and the bar was winding down,
yes.
about what time was that?
Like 12:45,
About what time was it? About what time was it that you left?
a little before 12, 12-ish.
Who, if anyone, left?
It was me, my daughter, Caitlin, and my husband.
How did you get, bless you, how did you get from the waterfall back to your house?
My husband drove the three of us back to Fairview Road.
When you came outside of the waterfall and were sort of getting into your car and about to drive home, what, if anything, did you observe as far as the weather or what was going on at that point?
It was just starting to snow a little, nothing major, just a little snowfall started coming down.
You could still see the street and the blacktop.
Yeah.
Again, about how long a car ride is that, generally speaking, from the waterfall to your house on there?
5 minutes, 7 minutes.
As when you arrived at, who, if anyone, was there when you got there?
We arrived and I came in. My son was sitting there with his two friends and my nephew Colin, who is Julie and Chris's son. He was there. I bumped into him when I walked in. I didn't realize he was there. I said, "Oh, hey, what are you doing here?" He said, "Oh, I just stopped by to see Brian, but I'm about to leave. My ride's about to be here." I said, "Oh, okay."
Back up just for a minute. So where does he park in relation to the house?
We pulled into the driveway.
Typically, is there an order to it as far as where the cars go, like his car versus your car versus any other car?
Not really, no.
Do you recall on that evening which side of the driveway he pulled into, the left?
I believe it was in front of the left garage.
When you come into and enter into the house when you were living there at 34 Fair, how many doors are there on the front of the house?
There's a side door by the garage, and then there's like a front door in the front of the house.
Is there any sort of particular rhyme or reason as to which door you would be entering?
We usually use the side door. Initially, I didn't like that because the side door walked right into the family room. So I like the other door, you could walk into a foyer you could take your shoes off, stuff like that. Eventually, people just didn't want to, it was, quicker to walk in the side door for the kids. So they would just go in the side door. But I think that night, because of the weather and it was wet out, I think I went in the front door so I could walk into the foyer and take my shoes off or wipe my feet or whatever. But some of the other people still may have gone in the side door.
When you came to that front door, shoes off in the foyer, is that when you ran into your nephew Colin?
Yes.
About how old was Colin?
17.
You mentioned that he had a ride. Did he give you any indication as to who that ride was?
He didn't mention at that time who the ride was.
That sort of interaction that you had with Colin in your house prior to him leaving and walking out, about how long a period of time?
A couple minutes, not even. Just a quick interaction.
Then he left the home. You didn't see him for the rest of the night.
No.
Then you come into the home, and again, I'm sorry, who was there initially when you?
So my son Brian and his two friends, Julie and Sarah, were just sitting at the kitchen table in like the dining room area of the kitchen.
Explain to the jury.
If you walk in, if you go to the right, it's like an open doorway, and that's like the dining room part of the kitchen, but then it extends to the back of the house where it's like an island and like the sink and the counters and the cabinets and all that. So it's just like long.
As far as the dining room and the kitchen, is there a wall or structure? Or anything
No, it's
separate them?
open in between the two of those things.
And if I were to go sort of further back within that home beyond the kitchen and the dining, what's back?
To the right, there's a family room.
And is there anything as far as a wall? Can you see into the family room?
You can. It's like an opening. Yeah, it's not completely open, but there's an opening.
If someone was standing in the family room and you were standing in the kitchen, you could see them, converse with them, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
When you come in and your son Brian Jr. is sitting around the table with two girls, Sarah and Julie, what are they doing?
We're just sitting there.
Was there any sort of music playing or anything like that going on?
There may have been. I'm not sure if there was music playing at that time, but there might have been.
You say at that time, was there anything that happened later on?
Well, later on that we had music connected to the little speaker that we were playing. Yeah, but when I first walked in, I don't remember if they had music going or not.
You get back to the house, what is it that you're doing sort of when you come back?
Come in, I assume I said happy birthday to my son, said hello to his friends. Then I just went to the kitchen area and they had ordered food. And so I just did my usual thing. I just was picking up, wasn't a huge mess, but I was just picking up the area, cleaning, probably check the bathroom to make sure that was clean. Just my usual thing that I do, just picking up around the house. Yeah. Yeah.
Is that something that you did continuously throughout the evening or?
Yeah, that's what I do.
Now, after you arrived home, who, if anyone else, came by?
Once we were there, it was me and my daughter and my husband, and Brian Higgins had come in. Then it was Brian and his two friends were already there. And my sister Jen and her husband Matt came in maybe 12:15ish.
Mr. Higgins, did he come in around the same time as you, or did he come after or before?
Yeah, he came in the same time. I think he might have pulled up to our house before us, but we got out of the car and went right into the house. So I assume he just came in basically around the same time.
Do you have any idea sort of what Mr. Higgins was driving that night when he came to your house?
I believe it was a Jeep.
Any idea where, in reference to your house, where Mr. Higgins parked?
I thought it was out on the curb facing up Fairview, maybe by our mailbox, but it could have been in the driveway. I'm not 100% sure.
Not something you were particularly paying attention to?
No.
And at some point after you and your daughter and your husband and then Mr. Higgins comes along, about how long a period of time is it between your arrival in the home and then when Miss McCabe and her husband?
15 minutes, 20 minutes.
As far as your nephew Colin, when he had left, was Miss McCabe and her husband there yet?
No.
When Miss McCabe and her husband come, where is it that, while you're at your house, where is it that everybody's calm?
They came in and they sat down at the kitchen table with Brian and his two friends. And then I believe my daughter, Caitlin, was sitting at the table as well.
Back at your home after leaving the bar?
Yeah.
About how long, skip forward to a little bit, people had left your home. About how long a period of time was it that people, from the time that you arrived back from Waterfall to the time that people left and you closed down?
By the time everyone left, it was probably close to 2.
Who was the last person?
My daughter, Caitlin.
Do you know how it was that she left, or who, if anyone, picked her up?
Her boyfriend, Tristan, picked her up because, like I said, he was going to have to get up anyways overnight to do the shoveling, plowing thing. So I think she didn't want to get stuck probably at our house for the next day. So she had just said, hey, can you...
And your answer there. Next question, Mr. Lally.
Prior to your daughter Caitlin leaving, let me ask you, as far as people leaving from your house, what was the order of how people left and when?
I believe Brian Higgins left first, approximately 1:30ish. Then Jennifer and Matt and Brian's two friends left 12:45, 12:50. And then, 1:45, 1:50, I'm sorry. Then Caitlin was probably closer to 2.
When your daughter Caitlin left, if anyone was left downstairs, and yourself and the other people?
Just me.
So your son and your husband had both gone up to bed at that point?
Yes.
At any point in time, you mentioned that there were a number of people that were around the table in the kitchen. And
Yes, sorry.
where did anybody else go around your house?
I know at one point, my husband and his friend Brian were in our family room. So I went in there and was talking to them. We had some shelves on the wall that just had a bunch of pictures, old pictures from our wedding or when Brian was in the Marine. So we were just look at them, laughing, talking about them. We stood in there for a little bit talking. And then eventually we just moved into the kitchen area where everybody else was.
To your knowledge, had Mr. Higgins been over to your house?
He may have been at our house for a graduation party, but I wasn't sure if he had ever been inside because the party was outside. It was a cookout. So I don't know if he'd been in that part of my house.
Now, as far as the outside, at any point in time during the course of the evening, did you hear anything unusual, see anything unusual outside of?
I didn't.
At any point in time, were you aware of anybody coming to your house that didn't come in?
I was only aware at one point. I saw my son, I think, either looking out the window or at the door, and his friend Julie, she went out the side door, and I said, to Brian, is Julie leaving? He said, no, she had asked her brother for a ride.
Objection. Sustained. No conversation. Mr. Lally's going to ask another question.
You saw your son's friend Julie go outside, and
So that has to be a yes or no.
at some point did Julie come back into the house?
Yes.
About how long was it, if you know, that she was outside before she came back?
I don't think it was very long, couple minutes.
Over the course of the entirety of the evening, at any point, did anybody else, other than the people that you talked about previously, come into your house? Specifically, John O'Keefe or Karen Read that you saw at the bar earlier that night, at any point in time on the evening of the 28th or the early morning of the 29th, did either of those people come into your house?
No, they never came into my home.
At any point in time, even on that evening or that early morning of the 29th, were you aware that they were coming?
I actually wasn't. I think when I was in the other room with my husband and his friend, I had missed the conversations about Jennifer reaching out with John or him and him texting her about where we lived. I didn't even realize that was happening, that they had any intention to come.
Let me ask you a little bit about sort of going back to the waterfall just for a brief course of your time there. How would you describe the tone or how was everybody?
It was fine. It was a nice night. It was nothing out of the usual. Just had a good time.
Nothing abnormal, no arguments, no fighting or anything like that?
No.
Same question as it relates to back at your house now at 34 Fairview Road. How would you describe the atmosphere back?
Same thing. We were just hanging out, sitting around the house, talking, having a good time. Nothing crazy.
After your daughter, Caitlin, gets picked up and she leaves, what, if any, how long did you stay up after?
I think once she left, I just did my final cleanup of the kitchen and shut the lights, and I went upstairs to bed.
Do you recall anything about locking the front door or anything?
No.
Is that something that you would always do, typically do, never do?
It was type of thing where we have 5 kids, everyone's coming in and out at different times. Like the last person in was supposed to lock it, but then we changed the doorknobs and immediately the keys got lost. It was just always a disaster. So a lot of times the door was just left unlocked.
When you went up to bed, you awake or asleep?
He was awake. He was just lying in bed watching TV.
Now, as far as over the course of that evening after you come up to bed with your husband, do you recall anything about him talking to anyone on the phone or any phone conversations or anything like that?
I do not.
At some point you fall asleep and then you wake up the next day, is that right?
Yes.
Turning your attention to later on that morning of the 29th. So you had gone to bed about what time?
Probably 2:30ish, somewhere around there.
It's a little unclear for my question, but when you go up to your bedroom, about what time is that?
About 2-ish.
30 that you're talking about, is that sort of when you fall asleep?
Yeah, sometime around there.
From that next morning, how is it that you wake up the next morning?
Well, at the point between 6 and 6:30 that morning, my sister Jennifer came bursting into my bedroom.
Bursting into your bedroom, is that correct?
Yes.
What, if any, how would you describe your sister Jennifer and how was she acting at that point?
She came in, my husband and I just sat up in bed. She's saying, he's out in the snow. We found him out in the snow. We don't know if he's okay. My immediate thought was just that something had happened to one of my children. Something had happened to one of her children. I couldn't imagine why she was in my bedroom at this time in the morning. I'm like, Jennifer, what are you talking about? She's
All right, next question.
Sorry, Darren, one moment. Let me back you up just for a second and I'll get back to this. As far as when your sister Jennifer comes into your bedroom, do you know about what time that was?
between 6 and 6:30.
And it's fair to say that's not a normal occurrence.
It's never happened before.
If you could just describe your sister Jennifer's demeanor when she first comes into your bedroom.
She was hysterical.
She says some things to you, and then where did you go?
I tried to ask her what was going on. What is she talking about? She told us.
Objection, Your Honor. No, I'm going to allow that.
So she told us what had happened or what she had just witnessed outside. And we were just trying to understand what she's saying. Like I said, I didn't know if it was something that happened to one of her kids, one of my kids. So I said, Jennifer, I don't know what you're talking about. So she finally was like, John, remember John from last night at the waterfall? I'm like, what do you mean? How could he be outside? She's like, you got to get up. The police are here and they want to talk to you. So my husband and I got up. I think I threw on a sweatshirt. We started to walk down the stairs. As we walked down the stairs into that foyer area, Officer Link was walking in the house.
So that front foyer area would have been the front door you were talking. When you get down to the bottom of the stairs, just Officer Lank, or there any other officers?
It was just Officer Link at that time. The door was halfway open. I pushed it open, looked out, and I saw like a cruisers and a couple of guys standing out in the snow. I said, Jennifer, where's John now?
Objection, Your Honor.
I'm going to ask you to move on, Mr. Lally. The objection is sustained.
As far as when you looked outside, did you see any ambulance or fire truck or anything like that?
No, I didn't see an ambulance. I did see maybe 2 cruisers. I don't remember if there was a fire truck there. I don't think there was, but I'm not sure.
And as far as Officer Lank or any other officers, is that correct?
Yeah.
And where did they go once you opened the door?
So he came in the house, and I believe around the same time Jennifer's husband, Matt, had come. I assume she had called him or whatever. So it was me, Brian, and Jen and Matt, and Officer Lang said, can I come in? Can I talk to you guys? We said, sure, absolutely. He came in, we sat at the table, and he was just asking us all, where were you last night?
Sustained. Next question, please.
That same dining room area.
And without regard to content of the conversation, but about how long a period of time did that?
I don't know, 45 minutes, maybe. I'm not exactly sure.
As far as how the conversation ended, at any point during the conversation, did yourself or your sister or your husband or did anyone ever end the conversation or tell the officers to leave the home or anything like that?
No.
You welcomed them inside once you realized what was going on?
Yes, absolutely. I believe another officer had come in as well.
Now, after the officers leave from your home, what happened?
So I believe they left and said that someone would be in touch with us, the state police or somebody. So they left and we were all just sitting there in shock. I'm asking Jennifer, what happened? How did you end up here? What's going on?
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained. Next question, please.
Your Honor, as far as may we approach this, Ms. Albert, any sort of specifics of your conversation with Ms. McKay? You had a conversation with her, is that correct?
Yes,
And about how long did that conversation go on for?
just her. We were all just sitting around the table talking.
Just to be clear, when we say all, who is all at this?
It was me, my husband, and Jennifer and Matt.
At some point later on, did other people come over your house?
Yes, at some point, my husband's friend Brian Higgins came over.
Do you know how he came to be at your house that morning?
I believe Brian called him to let him know. He had been with us the night before, and I think he had been friends with John and Karen, so Brian thought he should let him know.
Do you know about what time that was or how long after the officers left that Mr. Higgins came over?
Could have been 15, 20 minutes. I feel like he came somewhere around 7:38, and maybe the link had been done by 11. If he was around 6:30, I'm not really sure of the specifics.
And what happened then?
Then we were all just still sitting there. Kerry, who is another person that was called that morning, she had been at the hospital, so she was calling Jennifer, giving updates as to what was happening with John. So we were waiting to hear how he was, if he was okay. Then around, I don't know if it was 8:30, I had noticed my sister-in-law, Julie, had pulled into the driveway, and I saw her get out, and she was putting a box of donuts in my son's car, whose birthday it was, because they had a bit between them where every year she did that. She got him donuts and she would leave them for him. So I saw her and I said to my husband, oh,
Okay, not what you said, so wait for another question.
sorry.
That's okay.
You spoke to your husband and where did he go?
He went to the door to, Julie was about to get back. She should be made aware of what was going on.
So your husband goes at some point, sister-in-law Julie comes into the house?
Yes.
If you know about how long a period was Julie at your house initially that?
An hour or two. I'm not sure.
If you're not sure, you're not sure. So as far as people that were over your house that morning, do you have any idea how long people were congregating around your house after that initial Miss McKay bursting into your bedroom?
Again, it could have been between an hour and 2.
At some point, you mentioned that the Canton officers had indicated that you may be spoken to at some subsequent time by troopers from the state police, correct?
Yes.
And when was it that when was it in relation to this date that you spoke to anybody from the state police?
I wasn't interviewed for a couple days later.
Do you recall where you were when you were in?
at my house.
Now, reference to, you indicated that on the way back from the waterfall to your house at Fairview on night previous, on the 28th into the 29th, it just started to snow, is that correct?
Yes.
When you looked outside or opened the door for Officer Lank as he came into the house, what, if anything, did you observe as far as the weather and how it had changed?
To me, it was starting to look like blizzard conditions. It was very windy. It was snowing. Snow was starting to come down a lot now, and it was probably a couple inches accumulated, and it was.
Now, at any point in time over the course of that day, did you go outside from your house into the front yard or the driveway or anywhere?
I didn't.
Anyone else from your house other than the people coming and going? The people that live there, did you observe them going out into the front of the house area?
No.
So Albert, I'm placing before you a series of 8 photographs. I just asked you to look at them, review them, and then just look up whenever you finish.
Are these already in evidence?
Fair enough. Just ask you, ma'am, in general, in those photographs, do you recognize what's in those photographs?
Yes.
What do you recognize?
That's my front yard.
That was your front yard when you lived at 34 Fairview Road?
Yes.
What's contained in there, is that a fair and accurate portrayal of around the time of January 29th, 2000?
Yes.
So what I'm showing you here is what's been marked as exhibits 58, 59, 60, and 60. I'm going to direct your attention to this before you. It's a laser pointer. Just click on this button. With the court's permission, first I'd just like to start with exhibit 58 on the screen. Do you recognize what's up on the screen there?
Yes.
What do you recognize there?
It was my home at the time.
From this photograph, do you see that front door area where the foyer is and the side door area that you were talking about on?
Yes.
If you could, using the laser pointer in your hand, just direct the jury's attention to where each of those are.
That would be the very front door, and then the side doors over here in between.
And as far as the sort of what's in the front portion of this photograph, do you recognize that as, if I'm standing and facing as this photograph is, your house, where you lived at 34 Fairview? What, if anything, do you have as sort of a landmark or an item that you observed in that sort of left area?
Flagpole?
Is there a fire hydrant there?
Yes.
Do you see anything as far as like a box or something like that?
Yeah, I believe there was some electrical box that I don't think we ever actually knew what it was or what it did.
Fair to say all the years that you lived there, it's not something utilized, knew what it really did.
No.
Now, this particular area of the yard, in its relation to the house, was that a part of the yard that was used or utilized by the family all that much when you lived there?
No.
And that part of the yard where the fire hydrant, flagpole, that is, how close is that to the next door neighbors abutting the property?
It's pretty close. It's almost, I would say, close to the property line.
Now, as far as from the side of the road, in between sort of the curbing from the roadway and your front lawn, there's nothing there as far as a sidewalk or anything like that. Is that correct? The curbing that's between sort of the roadway and the front lawn, how would you describe that? Is it sharp curb, rounded curb?
A rounded curb.
Now, with reference to your drive, do you see that depicted in this particular photograph?
You can't really see it in the picture, no. But it would be over here. Yeah.
If I could direct your attention to the next photograph that you have before you.
Mm-hmm.
This gentleman, if I can have that one up on the screen as well. How do you recognize what's up on the screen?
Yes.
And this is just another photograph of your home as it was around January 2022 at 34.
Yes.
From this photograph now, the driveway and where that is.
Yes.
If you could just indicate to the jury where in this photograph that would be.
The driveway was right here. The 2 garage doors, and then there was driveway along here.
Now, in reference to that driveway, or in reference to your family at the time that lived at the house, about how many cars would there typically be when everyone's home parked in the driveway?
Could have been 4. Let me think. I think 4.
Who would those vehicles be typically operated by, and what kind of vehicles are we talking about?
I had my car, which was a Cadillac SUV. My husband had his work car. And then we had, I think, a Ford Explorer. And the kids were driving a Ford Escape, maybe?
All sort of bigger cars, all sort of.
Yeah.
If I could direct your attention to the next photograph. Again, what's up on the screen, is that what you have before you as the next exhibit?
Yes.
Just for the record, if you could read the number that's on that photograph now.
See?
Again, what's up on the screen, is that just another depiction of your home at that time?
Yes.
Now, when you open that door and Officer Lank is there and you invite him into your house to talk, you said that you saw some cruisers, correct? Where in relation to your property were the cruisers when you opened the door and saw them? If you could direct the jury's attention in this photograph.
I believe they were somewhere here.
If I could direct your attention to the next, again, the photograph that's up on the screen, is that what you have before you? Again, I'm sorry to keep asking you to
Yes,
do this, but
yes.
if you could read the number that's on the photograph.
60.
And so 63 up on the screen, if you could describe to the jury sort of what part of your property or abutting property are we looking at?
I believe our property ended somewhere along here.
Right about in the general area of the electrical box?
Yeah, yep.
And that next door residence there, Dan, what the number was for that?
I don't, maybe 36? I'm not sure.
Somewhere in the vicinity of your number.
Yeah,
If I could direct your attention to the next photograph.
64?
Thank you. With respect to this photograph, as far as the sort of side door, do you see that in this photograph?
Yeah, the side door would be right here.
And there's another door off to the right of the photograph, is that correct?
Yep, that door would go into the garage.
Typically, at least around this time, January or late January 20th, as far as the vehicles that you were talking about, would any of those vehicles go in the garage or what was in the garage?
The garage was a little bit cluttered. If there was a storm coming, we would try to arrange things so we could at least maybe get one or two of the cars in there, but otherwise we didn't put the cars in the garage. Only if it was gonna be a storm, we would try to get some of them out of the driveway.
And with reference to these specific dates of January storms, do you recall anything as far as putting vehicles?
I don't, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if we had maybe put mine in there because I had gotten picked up that night. I'm not sure.
I believe, is there one more photograph that we have to talk about?
Yeah, no, okay.
In addition, let me ask you this. At this time in January of 2022, did your family have any pets?
Yes,
How many pets did you have?
we had one. We had a dog.
What was the dog?
Club.
What type of dog was it?
It was a German Shepherd mix.
How long had you had the dog?
About 6 years, I believe.
Do you recall when you got the dog, how you got the dog, or where you got the dog from?
We got the dog from a shelter in Texas.
What type of shelter? Or
Yes,
where did the dog typically go within?
it was when it was allowed anywhere in the house.
As far as nighttime, would there be any sort of particular pattern of where the dog would sleep?
Yes, at nighttime when we went up to bed, it came up with us and it slept in our bedroom.
At any point in time, during the time from when you returned from the waterfall to your home, where was the dog?
The dog had been up in the room, and I believe my husband, when we first got in, brought her down to let her out to go to the bathroom.
When the dog went out to go to the bathroom and lived at 34 Fairview Road, where would the dog go? How would that dog leave?
She pretty much she knew the door where to go. So when she had to go, she would go to that door and she would just go out and run in the backyard and go and on her own.
So on her own, and someone would stand at the back door?
Yes,
The back door that we're talking about, what kind of door?
it's a regular door.
It opens, it is a sliding door.
Oh yeah, no, just a regular door. It had, I think, a storm door behind it.
The backyard area of your home, if you lived there in around January, how was that enclosed at all?
It was fenced in.
Putting it out if everything's closed up in the back.
Yes, as long as the gates were shut.
And as far as that particular evening, after you returned from the waterfall, you indicated your husband let the dog out. How long a period of time was the dog outside?
I believe it was pretty quick. She went, did her business, and came back in. I think she might have walked around the kitchen for a minute or two, and then I think you just brought her back upstairs.
To your knowledge, did Chloe the dog, at some point, obviously you've moved from 34 Fairview to North, correct?
hmm
When about was it in relation to this incident, January 29th, 2022, that you,
We moved in April of 3.
if any plans or discussions were there in reference to moving prior to January?
Objection, Your Honor.
So not the specifics, generally, not the conversation.
We had always planned to move, but it was in our plans that, what kids were starting to get older. We were looking to possibly downsize. So at the end of 2021, my husband's brother had sold his house.
Objection.
No, I'm going to allow that.
My husband's brother had sold his house and got a good deal for it. It sold pretty quickly. The market was really good at that time. So we just started thinking, hey, the kids are getting older. A couple of them had already moved out. We weren't going to be able to stay in that house. It's like a 5-bedroom house. Once our kids were gone, my husband and I wouldn't have been able to maintain that. Needed a lot of work. We couldn't afford it. So we said, maybe now's the time we should put it on the market and see what happens. So I think in November, December of,
Hold on. Next question, Mr. Lally.
sorry,
No, that's okay.
Objection, leading.
The objection sustained. Ask a non-leading question.
When was it that the sale was finalized?
April of 3.
As far as selling the house, what, if any, relation, what occurred on?
It had no relation to it. We had already had thoughts and plans of doing it before that happened. We had reached out to a realtor in the end of 21.
I have nothing further for this witness, Your Honor.
All right, Ms. Little.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Ms. Albert.
Hello.
You were at the Waterfall Bar and Grill on January 29th for approximately 4.5 hours. Is that correct?
I was there from, say, 7:45, 8 till about midnight.
About 4 hours?
Yeah.
You were there with a group of individuals, including Brian Albert, Jennifer McCabe, Matt McCabe, Julie Albert, Chris Albert, Caitlin Albert, and Tristan Morris, and then were later joined by Brian Higgins, correct?
Yes.
You testified that John O'Keefe and Karen Read joined your group around 11 p.m. Is that right?
Approximately.
Over the course of those 4 hours that you were there, did you see any sort of tension whatsoever between John O'Keefe and Ms. Read?
No, they were only there for an hour when I was there, but didn't have really any interaction with them. But no, I didn't see anything.
So based on your observations, everyone appeared generally happy and in good spirits, correct?
Yes. Yep.
At any point while you were at the Waterfall Bar and Grill, did you observe Karen Read stumbling, slurring her words, or otherwise?
I did not, but again, I never engaged in any sort of conversation with her.
Did you observe your husband, Brian Higgins, engaging in practice fighting techniques while you were at the Waterfall Bar and Grill?
I saw them, yeah.
Your Honor, if I could show just a screenshot of a video that's been previously marked.
A screenshot of it? Sure. Yes. So can you take this down just until the witness has it, please? I thought you were just showing the screenshot. You want to show it up here?
Yeah.
So what are you doing? I don't think there's a need to. I thought you were showing something to the juror that you were just, all right. So we will mark it for identification. So hold on. We need to, so we'll mark it for identification. So we'll take it from the witness for a minute, please. We'll mark it for identification, but this is incorporated in what exhibit number?
I believe it's Exhibit 50.
All right. Just so our record's clear.
Thank you.
One screenshot is W for identification.
All right. So now you can,
Your Honor, if I may, I haven't seen what the witness is looking at. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
all right. So you want to display it on the screen now, Ms. Little?
Yes, Your Honor.
Sure. Go right ahead.
Ms. Albert, do you see the two males?
Yeah.
I know it's hard to see.
Yeah.
Who is the man that has just been zoomed in with the logo on the back of his sweatshirt?
I believe it's Brian.
Okay. And then the person,
I think. Yeah. It's a little hard to tell.
I know this is hard to see because the number's blocking it.
Yeah.
But does that appear to be your husband to the left, kind of in a fighting stance?
Yeah, I think so.
Ms. Albert, when your husband drinks, does he often
So I'm
spar?
sorry. Are we taking this down or keeping it up?
Yes, Your Honor, you can take it down.
Okay. Thank you.
Ms. Albert, when your husband drinks, does he often get into sort of these practice sparring, practice fighting stances? Is that common for him?
Objection.
No, I'm going to allow it.
I don't think so.
So this type of behavior was unusual for him.
No, I think they were just fooling around. I don't think there was anything.
Is it unusual for you to see him sort of fighting?
I wouldn't call that practice fighting. I think they were just fooling around. And yeah, maybe I've seen him do that other times, but it was fooling around. They weren't practicing.
Let me put this a different way. You do know that you're highly trained.
Objection.
I'll allow that.
Absolutely not.
Your husband has no fighting experience whatsoever.
A highly trained fighter? No, he's not.
He has experience, correct?
Objection.
I'm going to see you at sidebar on this, please.
Albert, your husband has boxing experience, correct?
Yes.
He also has fighting experience from his training in the military, correct?
I don't know what fighting experience from the military means. He was in the Marine Corps. He was out of the Marine Corps in 1992.
But he had training through the Marine Corps and through the Boston Police Department with fighting and defensive tactics, correct? Ms. Albert, you testified earlier that you left the waterfall 11:45.
No, I said I think closer to 12.
Could I show you what's been previously marked as Exhibit 53? Your Honor, would I have permission to publish? Mr. Bates, if I could have you start the video at 5:40. If you could pause this video.
No, I don't.
Do you see the woman that's in the lower quadrant? Do you recognize that individual at all?
I don't. I can't tell who that is.
I know this is not the best video, so I'll play a little bit more and see if you might be able to recognize it. You don't recognize who that individual is?
It could be me. I'm not sure. I can't really tell.
All right. So this is an instance where the video has to speak for itself, right?
You could play just for a little bit longer. Did you recognize the woman that just walked forward?
Yes. Now seeing the coat, I recognize that it's me.
Thank you. Did you see what was in your hand when you walked by?
I don't.
You appear to be holding something.
Yes.
What is?
Looks like a can.
What time is that video taken?
58.
So that would have been approximately the time that you were leaving the Waterfall Bar and Grill.
Yep.
You guys had a fun night. It looks like you grabbed the White Claw, you were about to leave, is that correct?
Yes.
You testified earlier that you got home.
So can we turn the lights back on?
Thank you, Your Honor. Let me switch gears a little bit. You testified earlier that there are 4 cars that are usually parked in the driveway at 34 Fairview, correct?
Yes.
You listed at least the make and model of about 3 of those vehicles.
Yeah.
Do you recall that?
Yep.
You said there's a Cadillac that usually is parked in your driveway, there's a Ford Explorer, and there's a Ford Escape, correct? But you also said there's a 4th car. That's your husband's work vehicle.
Yes. Yeah.
What type of car is that?
That's a Ford Edge.
A black Ford Edge.
Yes. Yep.
Is there a reason that you didn't want to state or commit to that in front of this jury when you originally testified?
No, there's no reason. I was just trying to think of all the different cars. We have 5 kids. We've had a lot of different vehicles. I was just saying it as I remembered it.
News coverage in this case has revealed the importance of a Ford Edge.
Objection, Your Honor.
Abstained.
In your mind, a Ford Edge has significance to this case, doesn't it?
Objection, Your Honor.
No, can you answer that? Does a Ford Edge have significance in this case to you?
I've heard it talked about. Yeah.
What you've heard talked about is that an eyewitness saw.
Objection, Your Honor.
I'm going to stop you on that. The objection sustained.
Ms. Albert, you know there's significance to the Ford Edge, and that's the one
Objection, Your
vehicle
Honor.
that you did not mention in your initial.
So I'm going to allow that question. Can you answer that?
I just was trying to think of all the different makes and models. I did not purposely say that.
Where did your husband, you testified earlier that you weren't sure exactly where Brian Higgins that night when he arrived at your house, correct? You said, I'm not sure, but then you gave a pretty vivid description about him being parked, you think, in front of the house by the mailbox facing away from your residence, correct?
Right. Yep.
Is that statement something that's from your personal recollection or for something that you've discussed with other witnesses in this case?
No, it's from my personal recollection of what I'm pretty sure I remembered. He pulled in first, he backed out so we could pull in, and then I'm pretty sure he pulled out and parked along the curb where the mailbox was.
So you haven't discussed that statement with any other witnesses in this case?
I don't remember. I don't think so.
You testified earlier that when you arrived at 34 Fairview, your son, Brian Albert Jr. was there, Julie Nicole was there, Sarah Levinson was there, and that your nephew, Colin Albert, was also correct?
Yes.
Can you describe your interaction with Colin Albert when you walked in the door?
It was literally, I was coming in. I think we almost bumped into each other. I said, I didn't realize he was there. I said, hey, what are you doing here? He said, oh, I just come by to see Brian, but my ride's on its way. I'm about to leave. I said, oh, okay. And I said, all right, I see ya. He just continued on. I think he must have went out the door.
When you first testified, I believe you stated that you saw Colin seated at the table with Brian Jr.
When I testified, when?
earlier.
I don't believe I said that.
Shortly after.
No, I don't believe I said that.
You never said that he was initially seated with Brian Jr.
No, I'm pretty sure I said when I walked in, I immediately saw him.
When you walked in the door, you're saying he was already leaving to go get him.
He was standing, looked to me like he was getting ready for someone who was coming to pick him up.
When you pulled up with Brian Higgins, and you have never mentioned seeing any other vehicle waiting outside the house for Colin.
No,
You didn't observe another vehicle outside the house.
no. He said to me, my ride's almost here. I'm leaving. So I didn't see anything outside about his ride.
And it was cold outside.
I don't know if he went and stood and waited by the door. I came in the house, and like I said, I immediately said hello to my son, his friends. I went and started doing my cleaning, and I didn't really pay attention. I assume he left because I never saw him again.
So you're not sure if he was standing by the
I'm not sure. He could have been standing there waiting. He said his ride was about to be there.
but you didn't see him.
I did not see him leave.
You testified that your German Shepherd, Chloe, was also at the house when you arrived home on January.
Yes.
She's a large German.
Yep, about 70 pounds.
She's not great with strangers.
I wouldn't say that.
You wouldn't say that she's a poorly worded question. Would you say that she's good with strangers?
I'd say she's fine with strangers.
She's definitely not good with other animals, is she?
No, she did not like other dogs.
Chloe actually has a well-documented fight, doesn't she?
Objection.
Does she?
With dogs. A couple dogs, yes.
Ms. Albert, she also has a bite history with humans, doesn't she?
Objection.
Ask that differently.
Ms. Albert, Chloe has injured other humans.
Objection.
I'm going to allow that.
In one incident in May of 22, when she got out and was fighting with another dog, the woman whose dog it was tried to break up the 2 dogs. While she was trying to break up the 2 dogs, she got injured.
There were actually 2 individuals who were injured in that incident, correct?
There was 2 women, but I believe just one woman, from what I understand, had an injury from Chloe. The other one may have fallen or something, but I'm not sure 100%.
There were 2 women who were actually taken to the hospital after that incident, correct? correct?
The police or called an ambulance just to make sure they were okay.
You mentioned that Chloe had actually escaped from the backyard
Mm-hmm.
in that incident.
Yes.
And that happened.
It had happened a few times, yes.
Mr. Albert let Chloe out when he arrived.
Yep.
Mrs. Albert, you don't have Chloe anymore, do you?
Nope.
In May of 2022, 4 months after Mr. O'Keefe's death, you got rid of your family dog of 6 years.
Objection.
So is that true? Is that when you got rid of your dog?
I did not get rid of my dog. I rehomed my dog.
Your dog is
Where she is, she's in Vermont. In previous testimony, that information has all been given. So if she was ever needed for anything, we know where she is.
Was that testimony given to the defense?
Probably.
Hearing where you testified about this?
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained.
Your Honor, can we approach?
Sure.
Ms. Albert, you're aware that we actually saw records regarding Chloe and her bites.
Objection, Your Honor.
Was it from this witness?
It was.
That's a yes or no from there. Yes or no?
It was from.
I'm going to sustain the objection.
I want to direct your attention back to the early morning of January 29th. You testified that everyone who arrived at your house just after midnight was generally gathered at the table in the kitchen area, correct?
Yes.
Over the course of that evening, you had never heard any sort of disruption inside, correct?
No.
You didn't hear a crash.
There needs to be an answer.
Sorry. No.
You certainly never heard any screaming or yelling,
No.
and you never heard the screech of any brakes outside, correct?
Correct.
On July 20th, 2023, you testified before a grand jury. Mr. Lally was not there, correct? Do you recall that?
Yes.
And you were specifically asked during the course of that hearing where everyone was positioned around the table that night. Do you remember that sort of line of questioning? You explained that your sister Jennifer was seated next to Brian.
Objection. Is there a question?
We're getting that question, so go ahead.
You were very specific about how people were seated at that table that night. Do you remember that testimony? You explained that Jennifer was seated next to Brian Jr. and Matt McCabe was across from him. Do you recall that?
Yep.
But when you were asked where your husband and Brian Higgins were positioned at the table, you weren't able to place, isn't that true?
Because I don't believe they ever sat at that table.
What you told the grand jury was that at least at one point, they had left the room and they were out of.
I'm not sure I said that.
Told the jury that you were cleaning and you weren't sure where they went, correct?
Initially, when I first came in the house and I was doing my thing, I don't remember exactly where they were.
They told the grand jury that you don't recall seeing them at the table, but you don't recall where they went because you were focused on cleaning, correct? There was one point at which you said that you joined them in family
Yes.
room, is that right? But while you were cleaning, you said, I don't really know what they were doing, but they weren't there, correct?
Yes.
So you recall your husband and Brian Higgins left your view and went to some other place in the house that evening, correct?
It could have.
Ms. Albert, how many steps is it from the front door to the basement? Poorly worded question, I will rephrase it. When you open the front door of your house, how many steps does it take to get to the door to the basement?
4 or 5.
You testified earlier that Brian Higgins left 34 first, correct?
Yes.
Then Matt, Jennifer McCabe, Sarah Levinson, and Julie Nagel left together, correct?
Yes.
The very last person to leave your house that night, you said today under oath, was your daughter, Caitlin, correct?
Yes.
You said she left your house close to, is that right?
Yeah.
Ms. Albert, that's not what you told Sergeant on January 29th, 2022, is it?
I don't recall what I told him.
Would it refresh your recollection to take a look at your statement to Sergeant Lang?
Sure.
I'd like to direct your attention to page 2 of the supplemental.
Would you show the prosecutor, please?
Yes. Just the camera, please.
Your Honor, may we approach just briefly?
Ms. Little, maybe you can clarify that. Yes.
I'd like you to take a look too. You don't need to read it out loud. You read this very last paragraph here.
Down hit 7.
Actually, this section right
Okay.
here, the second paragraph to the bottom. You don't need to read it out loud. Just look up once you're done.
Are you going to clarify that, Ms. Little? Statement?
Oh, how can I approach, Your Honor? Ms. Albert, this is just a police report containing an interview that was conducted, correct?
Yep.
With Sergeant Lang on January 29th. Is that right?
Yes, the morning of.
Thank you. Have you had a chance to
Yeah.
recollection? Yeah. Excuse me. Is your recollection refreshed?
Yep.
Isn't it true that you told Sergeant Lang that your daughter left at 12:15 on January 29th?
Do not recall saying that. I've maintained in every interview testimony I've had that she was the last to leave. I don't know, it was very confusing that morning. Officer Lank was trying to ask everybody, where had you been? Where had you been? When did you get here? When did you leave? I don't know if somehow it was misconstrued, but I've always maintained that Caitlin was the last to leave.
That's because Sergeant Lang was talking to everyone at the same time.
Yeah, we're sitting around the table. It was everyone was we're all in shock. It's a little confusing.
Sure, it was more of a conversation than an.
I guess you could say that.
Yes.
I don't believe I said that. I think maybe someone was saying, oh, Jen and Matt got there at 12:15. He misunderstood. It got misconstrued later in his notes. But I've always said in any other time I was questioned that my daughter was the last one to leave. So I don't,
So you weren't trying to protect your daughter.
no,
You were forthcoming about the troopers with information about the individuals who were present that
yes,
case at length before your interviews with law enforcement, correct?
Objection.
I'll allow it. Ju?
of course we discussed the case, but just everything that was going on, we were trying to figure out what happened.
You testified that you spoke to Trooper Proctor on February 3rd, 2022. Is that correct?
Yes,
That would be 6 days after this occurred. Is that right?
yep,
That's the very first time that you were ever interviewed by Massachusetts State Police.
yes, yep,
Aside from that sort of conversation you described with Sergeant.
yep.
When you spoke to Trooper Proctor on February 3rd, 2022, you left a lot of names out of individuals who were present at your house on the morning of January 29th, 2022. Isn't that correct?
I'm not sure who was left out.
Did you tell Trooper Proctor that your son, Brian Albert Jr., was home that night?
Was home the night of his birthday, or what do you mean?
Yes, the night of his birthday.
He was home with his friends.
Did you tell that to Trooper Proctor?
I assume I did.
If it wasn't in his report, that would have been his mistake.
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained.
Did you tell Trooper Proctor your daughter, Caitlin Albert, returned home with you after the waterfall?
I believe so.
Did you tell Trooper Proctor that your son had 2 female friends at your house when you arrived?
I believe so.
Notably, did you tell Trooper Proctor that Colin Albert was present at your house?
I probably didn't, because anytime I was questioned about who was there, to me it was who was there afterwards, hanging out from like the 12:15 point on. I didn't consider Colin as being there because I literally crossed paths with him. He left, and I didn't consider him being a part of the group that was there.
Who was at the house that night?
I assume he asked that. But I also didn't mention the people that my son had previous, because I didn't consider them as part of the people that I was with when I got home.
You never mentioned Colin Albert to Trooper Proctor, correct?
Correct.
You never mentioned Colin Albert to Sergeant Lang.
Correct.
Ms. Albert, you knew that if you gave Trooper Proctor the name of your nephew, that he would have to interview him,
Objection.
All right, I'm going to sustain that objection.
or your nephew to have to tell the police what they saw, what they heard, and what they did that.
Objection.
I'm going to allow that. Is that true?
That is not true.
But you never told Trooper Proctor.
I didn't mention Colin because I didn't consider him as part of the group that we were hanging out with after the waterfall, because he left as soon as I walked in. I didn't even think of him.
Didn't even think of him.
No,
Didn't think it might be important for the state trooper who was investigating this case to know the individuals who were leaving at the precise time that Mr. O'Keefe and Ms. Reed arrived at.
Objection.
Sustained.
Ms. Albert, what's the first thing you remember waking up to on the morning of January?
my sister bombing into my bedroom.
Your Honor, if we could approach.
Approach sidebar. Or Ms. Little, we're going to mark what you have in your hand for identification.
Ms. Albert, I'd like to show you a photograph which purports to be.
Photograph.
Ms. Albert, do you recognize that photograph?
Yep.
What is it?
Picture of my house.
Does it appear to be generally to scale? Do you recognize sort of the flagpole in the yard,
Yes.
the house?
Yep.
The driveway? That looks.
Yes.
And that looks accurate in terms of scale, correct?
Yes.
Permission to publish?
Sure.
Ms. Albert, where is your bedroom located?
You want me to show it?
Yes, if you could explain.
Right up here.
Your bedroom is in that upper left-hand quadrant, correct?
Yes.
Far left window, that's your bedroom window. Is that right?
The two of them.
On January 29th, you had 2 bedroom windows on the left side of the house that were facing the front lawn where Mr. O'Keefe's body was found, correct?
Yes.
You're aware that Ms. Reed, Jennifer McCabe, and Carrie Roberts arrived outside your property around 6:04 a.m., correct?
Yes.
Did you hear any fire trucks that morning?
I did not.
Did you hear any ambulances?
I did not.
You didn't see the flashing lights of emergency vehicles outside your bedroom window?
I did not. My blinds were shut. My curtains were closed. I did not see anything.
You testified the very first thing you remember was Jennifer McCabe waking you up in your bedroom.
Yes.
So I'm sorry, just to keep track, are we going to take this down now, Ms. Little? Or we can keep the lights on? I just want to keep track of that.
Yes, ma'am,
Okay,
thank you. What time was it?
I thought it was somewhere between 6 and 6:30.
Can I have a moment?
sure.
If I told you it was around 6:45 based on video surveillance footage, would you quarrel with that?
What you say?
Does that sound about right to you?
Yep. I initially from the beginning just said 6:30. I wasn't quite sure.
What the two calls that you received from your sister, 6:00 and 6:08 a.m., which were,
I never answered any phone calls from my sister that morning.
you're aware that the Cellbrite records indicated that you answered two calls from your sister.
Objection, Your Honor.
And 6:08 a.m.
The objection sustained.
You could take a look at this report. Ms. Albert, you received,
If I could just see what's being shown to the witness before. Thank you. May we approach?
I'm going to take that, please. To Ms. Albert,
Thank you.
you can go back and ask a question, and let's see where we go with this.
Albert, do you recognize this document?
Recognize it?
Do you know what it is?
Yeah, I see what it is.
Does it refresh your recollection as to the two calls you received on the morning of January 29th?
It says here 2 calls were
With-
placed.
Don't read it, but you were asked a specific question. So if you could answer the question, please.
Does that refresh your recollection to the two calls you received from your sister on the morning of January 29th?
She may have placed those phone calls to me, but I never answered them.
You received a call from Jennifer McCabe on January 29th at 6:07:42 a.m. that lasted for 9 seconds, correct?
She may have placed a phone call to me. I never answered it. I never spoke to her that morning.
You also received a second call from your sister at 6:08:17 a.m. that lasted for 7 seconds, correct?
Objection.
Go ahead.
It says that, but I never answered a phone call from my sister Jennifer that morning.
You're aware that cell phone companies have what are called tolling records.
Sustained.
Ms. Albert, it's your testimony here today that you never spoke to your sister that morning.
I never spoke to my sister on the phone that morning.
Who else was in your bedroom?
Me and my husband
You and Brian, only two individuals who could have answered those calls.
were the only 2 people in the room besides the dog.
At 7 a.m., someone had a 9-second call with Jennifer McCraft.
Objection.
All right, sustained. You've got more for this witness, I imagine, Ms. Little?
Yes, Your Honor.
So we'll take the luncheon recess, folks.
Ms. Albert, you testified that Jennifer McCabe woke you up around 6:45 a.m., correct?
I believe I said between 6 and 6:30, but could have been, yes,
She obviously had access to the house.
yes.
The door wasn't locked.
Nope.
That's sort of a typical practice for you.
Yeah, it was just sometimes with the kids, the last one in, supposed to lock it, they didn't. It just wasn't always locked.
And inside your house, you had plenty of blankets.
So as to that form, I'm going to sustain the objection. You can ask the question a different way, Ms. Little.
Objection.
I'm going to sustain the objection. You can ask a shorter form of that question.
Yes.
You were also lying next to a first responder.
Objection.
That,
Yes.
Neither you nor your husband came outside to help John.
We did not go outside because we had no idea what was going on outside. We were sound asleep until my sister came into my bedroom.
Delali?
Thank you, Your Honor. With regard to phone calls from your sister Jennifer McCabe that morning, shortly after 6 a.m., did those phone calls wake you up?
No,
Did you answer those phone calls?
no,
Did you speak to Jennifer McCabe on the phone prior to her, or at any point on that morning prior to her coming into your room?
I did not.
You were shown something that's a Cellbrite extraction report, correct?
Yes.
Not just that specific one, but have you ever seen any Cellbrite extraction report before in your life?
No,
So fair to say you don't know how to interpret the data that's on there?
no,
Fair to say that you don't know whether or not an answered call or something that's listed as answered was something that was actually answered or went to voice.
correct.
With regard to your dog, Chloe, following that incident in May of 22, what, if anything, did you and your husband do with regard to the person that had been bitten?
We had gone over to their house to apologize for what had happened and offered to pay any bills that they may have had for any injury to the dog or anything. Then after that, we just decided that we thought the best thing to do would be to try to rehome it because I just didn't want something like that to happen again.
To the jury, sort of what are the steps that you took in the process of?
Initially, I had called a bunch of shelters and they were pretty much telling me that it would be hard to rehome her if she was dog aggressive and they would probably have to put her down. I didn't want to do that. The family, we love the dog. So I did not want to do that. So I reached out to the woman in Texas who we got the dog from to see if she could help. She said she couldn't take it back, but she would try to help me out. So she ended up finding a woman who lived in Vermont. I think she lived alone. She had big property. It seemed like a good fit. She wanted to take Chloe and we made arrangements and I went and met this woman halfway and I gave her Chloe.
What, if any, conversations or contact that you had with that woman in Vermont rehoming?
For a few months after
So not the substance of it, but
You had contact.
yes, I did for a few months, back and forth.
Now, with reference to Chloe, when your sister Jennifer McCabe comes into your bedroom hysterical that morning, January 29th, was Chloe in the room at the time?
Yes,
You were asked some questions about the evening or the early morning when people had come from the waterfall back to your home, correct? At some point, you were cleaning and Mr. Higgins and your husband were out of your line of sight, is that correct?
yes.
How long a period of time were we talking?
It wasn't very long, a couple minutes. Wasn't watching where everybody was and what everybody was doing.
Relatively short period of time.
Yes.
so you need to take this down, sir. Thank you. There was something that was just up there. Go ahead.
Ms. Albert, you never received any voicemails from Jennifer McCabe on January 29th, did you?
Not that
You also have never produced, pursuant to our request, any documentation about the whereabouts of Chloe.
The objection sustained. I'm going to strike that question. Disregard the question. Well, questions aren't evidence, so we can leave it on the record, but the objection sustained.
You've never turned over any information about the location of Chloe. Since the pending information about the whereabouts of Chloe, you have.
I believe so.
When did you do that? No further questions.
All right, Ms. Albert, you are all set.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Your Honor. Good afternoon to the jury.
Good afternoon.
Could you please state your name and spell your last name?
Sure, it's Brian, last name Albert, Albert.
Where do you live, sir?
I live in Norwood, Massachusetts.
How long have you lived in?
Approximately a year.
Who, if anyone, you live in?
My wife, Nicole, and my son, Brian, and my son, Brendan.
Actually, just a little bit about your family as far as, let me start with yourself and your wife, Nicole. How long have the two of you been married?
Approximately 29 years.
Were you together for a period of time prior to getting married?
Yes, we've known each other since we were 13, 14 years old.
Do you have any siblings, sir?
I do.
How many siblings do you have?
I have 5 brothers and 1 sister.
If you could, just as far as, are you the oldest?
I'm the oldest of 7, yes.
As far as your brothers and sisters are concerned, what are their names? And if you could rank them sort of by.
Sure, the next sibling after me is my sister Kathleen. Then I have a brother Chris, a brother Kevin, a brother Keith, a brother Brendan, and a brother Timmy.
Nicole, do you have,
Yes,
how many children do you have?
5.
How old are they?
So my oldest daughter is 29. My son Brian is 25. My son Brendan turns 23 today. And I have twins, or we have twins that are 20 years old. Caitlin's 28. I'm sorry, I said 29.
Prior to living at your address in Norwood,
Canton, Mass.
and how long have you lived in?
Approximately in the house on Fairview Road, approximately 11 years.
In total, about how long have you before moving?
Approximately 45 years.
And that's 34 Fairview Road, is that right?
Yes.
What, if any, relationship did that home or that residence have to your family before you and your wife?
My parents had lived at that residence prior to us.
So you had spent some of your childhood in that house as well?
Yes.
Do you work, sir?
I retired now. Retired.
What did you retire?
Boston Police Department.
How long were you a member of the Boston?
Approximately 30 years.
Within the Boston Police Department, were you assigned to any sort of specific unit or special duties?
My last assignment, is that what you're referring to?
Yes.
Yes. My last assignment was the Boston Police Fugitive Unit.
Sir, if I could turn your attention to January 28, 2022. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Do you recall what day of the week that was?
The 28th, I believe, was a Friday.
And when you first got up on the 28th, where were you with that?
On the 28th, I was in New York City.
Why had you gone to New York?
So I went to New York for a funeral of a New York City police officer who was killed in the line of duty.
About what time or what day did you go down to?
We went down the day before, so I believe that was Thursday.
Do you recall how it was that you got down there?
Yes, I flew to New York.
When you say we, who, if anyone, went with you on that trip?
I flew with a friend and a coworker named Eddie Hernandez.
So another Boston police officer?
Yes.
Down in New York at that funeral, were there other members of law enforcement that you knew were?
Yes, there were thousands of police officers that went to the funeral.
And included within those people, you mentioned you have a brother Kevin, is that correct?
Yes,
Is he a police officer as well?
he is.
Where is he?
He's a detective in Canton, Massachusetts.
Was he down at this funeral as well?
He was.
Do you know a gentleman by the name of Brian Higgins?
Yes.
Was Brian Higgins at this funeral service?
Yes, he was.
How is it that you know Brian?
So I know Brian Higgins initially from work, professional relationship. I've known him known of him for 10 or 15 years. And the past few years, more recently, we worked together on a closer basis, and I became better friends with him.
Fair to say that when you became better friends with Elias,
Yes.
as far as your return trip from New York, what, if anything, happened?
On the return trip from New York, we drove back.
Why did you drive versus fly back?
So that weekend, there was anticipated snowstorm. I believe the flight that we were taking with JetBlue may have even been canceled. And Brian Higgins was leaving in a vehicle that morning. So we ended up driving, or after the funeral, we ended up driving with him.
So it's yourself, Mr. Higgins, and then who, if anyone else?
Eddie Hernandez and my brother Kevin.
When you arrived back in Massachusetts, where was this that you went?
I initially went to the Charlestown to pick up my vehicle.
Where was your vehicle?
It was at a police station, Charlestown Station. It's a satellite station located in Charlestown.
And that was in reference to the airport, is that correct?
Yes,
So that would have been Logan that you flew out of?
airport, yes.
After you were dropped off with your vehicle, what kind of vehicle was that?
That was a Ford Edge
Was that a vehicle?
work vehicle.
So you get dropped back off at your work vehicle. Where did you go?
From Charlestown, I drove back towards the Canton area, and I met Brian Higgins at a restaurant bar called the Hillside.
Canton as well.
I believe so. It's on the Canton-Milton line. I believe it sits in Canton.
And what was the purpose of you and Mr. Higgins?
After the drive home, he asked if I wanted to get some food and stop off. I said yes.
If you know about what time was it that you got to?
I want to say around 9:30, perhaps. Not entirely sure.
When you arrived there, what did you?
So we went into the establishment and had a drink and hung out for a while.
Did you order anything?
I did not. I believe Brian did, though.
While you were at the Hillsides with Mr. Higgins, what, if any, communication did you receive from your wife, Nicole?
So I talked to my wife, I think more than once, and she had let me know that her and a few people were at another location in Canton. And she had asked if I wanted to come by and see them.
What was that other?
That other location was the Waterfall.
Is that an establishment you were familiar with?
Yes,
You've been there before several times.
I had been there before, yes.
So you drove then from the Hillside to the waterfall?
Yes.
About how long a drive is that?
Maybe 7 minutes, between less than 10 minutes.
So as you're going on that drive, the snow that was anticipated coming in, had that anything related to that started yet?
No, I at that time, I don't recall any snow.
In relation to the waterfall, where did you park?
In the parking lot for the waterfall, which is adjacent to the door to go inside. So it's to the left if you're looking at the building from Washington Street.
When you come into, now, when you left the Hillside, Mr. Higgins stayed there?
Yes, he stayed.
When you came into the waterfall, who, if anyone, was there?
So when I walked in and I saw my wife, my oldest daughter, Caitlin, I saw my brother, Chris, his wife, Julie, my brother-in-law, Matt, and my sister-in-law, Jen.
Your brother-in-law, Matt, and your sister-in-law, Jen, their last name is McCabe, is that right?
Yes.
If you could just explain to the jury sort of how related as far as where it is now.
My brother, Chris's wife is Julie, and then Nicole's sister is Jen, and Jen's husband is Matt McCabe.
Is it fair to say that you've probably known Jennifer McCabe about as long as you've known?
Yes, since she was a little kid, maybe 6, 7 years old.
You see these people, and where are they situated in the water?
There was a high top table in the front area as you walk in the middle of the room, and everybody was just around the high top table.
What, if anything, was there as far as live entertainment?
There was a band playing there.
With reference to the people that you've just spoken, as far as your wife and your daughter specifically, were they at the high top table closer to the band or further away?
They were on the side of the table that's closer to the door as you come in, and then there were other people on the opposite side of the table that was closer to the bar area.
After you came into the waterfall, went up to your family, what did you order? Anything? What did you do?
Yeah, just said hi to everybody. I don't recall exactly, but I'm sure I ordered a drink and then just hung out with family and friends.
Following your arrival, I showed up in a event.
There was another couple at the table. I don't know if they were there initially when I walked in, but there was another couple at the table whom I believed were there before I got there, but I just don't know what their names were.
Do you know how they were related?
I don't. I think they're friends with Jen and Matt, but I'm not 100% sure.
Where were they situated in reference to where your wife and your daughter were?
So they were, I believe, to the right of this pretty large high top table. Yes.
If you recall, what were you drinking that night?
I don't recall. I usually drink beer, Mick Ultra, but I can't remember that night what I was drinking.
Following your arrival, family eventually showed up at this establishment in Georgia.
Yes.
Who were they, sir?
After I was there, maybe about a half hour, Brian Higgins arrived at the location.
If you recall, what, if any, sort of communication did you have with Mr. Higgins, or how did Mr. Higgins know to come to the waterfall specifically?
Because while we were at the hillside, I had mentioned that I was going to be leaving to go to the waterfall to see my family who was already there. I invited him to come by if he wanted to.
At any point in time, sort of throughout the course of the day, yourself and Mr. Higgins, you had each other's sort of information and cell numbers, things like that.
Yes.
At any point in time throughout the course of the day or the evening, did you have occasion to text or phone call or anything with Mr. Higgins?
Yes.
After Mr. Higgins arrived, who, if anyone else, came into the waterfall and joined you?
Probably after about a half hour later from Brian Higgins arriving, John O'Keefe came into the waterfall with the defendant.
That would have been probably about 11.
Yes.
John O'Keefe, if you could tell the jury, did you know John O'Keefe?
So I knew John O'Keefe, but not well. I had only met him 2 times prior to that night, but I knew him to be a Boston cop, and I knew of him, and I knew some things about him.
As far as the Boston Police Department, it's a fairly large department. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
About how many members or how many people are on Boston?
Depending on the year, sometimes it's upwards of 2,000.
Through the course of your work over the decades that you worked with the Boston Police, did you ever work with or have any professional sort of interaction?
No, I don't remember working with him directly within the Boston Police Department.
Were you aware of sort of
Yes, I knew where he worked.
where did you?
I believe he worked at the SORI unit, which is the sex offender registry unit.
You mentioned just briefly before that you had heard of him, correct?
Yes.
What is it that you had heard?
I knew him to be a friend of my sister-in-law, Jen, and her husband, Matt. I knew him to be a friend of my brother, Chris, and my sister-in-law, Julie. I knew him to be a friend of my brother, Kevin's. I've heard his name mentioned multiple times. I knew that he had a horrible couple tragedies in his family. I knew that he stepped up and decided to take care of his niece and his nephew when they tragically lost their parents.
How would you describe?
Although I didn't know him, I considered him to be a friend, and our relationship was very good, cordial. I considered him to be somebody that I could hang out with and have a good time with.
You mentioned that Mr. O'Keefe walked in around 11, and just for clarity purposes, you're referring to Karen Read, is that correct?
Yes.
Do you see Ms. Read in the courtroom today?
Yes, I do.
Could you just identify as to where she's seated or not?
Sure. She's a female at the table in front of me with a black top on, long sleeve.
Just identification.
Yes.
With regard to Ms. Read, had you met Ms. Read prior to that date of January 28th?
I believe I had met her one time a week prior.
Do you recall any specifics about that meeting or how it is that you came to meet her about a week prior?
I do.
If you could explain to the jury what those circumstances.
Sure. I met her at the hillside. I believe she was there with John a week prior.
As far as your interaction with her on that particular evening, anything significant stand out to you?
No.
When they came in, and by they, I'm sorry, I mean Mr. O'Keefe and Ms. Read came into the waterfall, where did they go in relation to where you were sort of situated at the high?
I don't remember them actually walking in the front door. I remember them being in my general area at some point. And they went towards the other side of the table where my sister-in-law, Jen, and my brother-in-law, Matt, were standing.
At some point, did either or both of them make their way towards your side of the table, your side of it, and what, if any, interaction?
Yes, I remember having an interaction or more than one interaction with John. Came over to say hello, and we had some conversation, not for too long, but yes.
Anything specific about that conversation or anything?
No, I think we were talking mostly about work. I think he let me know that the sergeant, I guess, that worked in his unit was leaving, left or transferred, and he was jokingly saying that I should try to get a job over it where he works.
As far as the defendant, Ms. Read's conversation,
I don't remember having any interaction with her whatsoever.
as far as when Mr. O'Keefe came over, observe as far as what he was wearing, clothing, anything like that?
I don't really remember what he was wearing for clothing. I believe he had a baseball hat on. Other than that, I can't remember his clothing.
Specifically, do you recall anything as far as like a winter coat or anything like that?
I can't say. I wasn't really paying attention to what he was wearing. I don't know.
As far as just his general features, as far as what you could observe, what, if any, sort of injuries or anything did you observe on his person at that time?
I observed no injuries at that time.
Over the course of the evening, you had a couple of interactions with Mr. O'Keefe, is that correct?
Yeah, I believe we talked a few times, hung out, stood next to each other for a while, like you normally would do at a bar restaurant.
Is the band playing while this is going on? Is that correct?
Yes, the band was there. I believe they took a break here and there, but they were there for the night.
How would you describe the general mood or demeanor of the group?
In one word, it would be fun. Everybody was in a great mood. People were getting along. It was friends and family, and it was just seemed like a great night.
Do you recall about what time started to wind down? Or
I believe the band stopped playing probably close to 12. Things started winding down a little before 12.
from the group that you just described at the high top table, what was the order in which people left the establishment, starting with the first?
So I believe the first to leave was myself, my wife, Nicole, my daughter, Caitlin, and Brian Higgins left at that time as well.
Had anybody left from your group prior to when the bar starts to wind down around 12, correct?
Yes.
Prior to the bar winding down, had anybody from your group left before that?
I didn't remember or notice that. I'm not sure.
So the first to leave from your group when the bar is winding down is yourself, Mr. Higgins, your wife, and your daughter.
Yes.
When you exit the establishment, where do you go?
Into the parking lot to my vehicle.
Let me take you back just for a moment back into the waterfall. During the course of the evening, what, if any, conversation was had by you or amongst the group that you observed as far as where to go next, or what were you doing following?
So there was some conversation relative to going to my brother's sub shop, which is across the street, and he was maybe going to make some pizzas for people if they were hungry. So that was discussed.
And did that end up?
No, some people didn't want to go over there, and for whatever reason, it just didn't happen.
Beyond that, was there anything else that was discussed as far as, and what was that?
So it ended up being my son Brian's 23rd birthday. So at 12 o'clock, he would be 23. There was some discussion about if anybody wanted to go by the house to say happy birthday to him. I know my wife, Nicole, mentioned it to Jen and Matt, and it was said, I believe, in the group where we were standing.
So was that sort of an open invitation that was extended to?
Yeah, sure. Anybody that was there was welcome to come by if they wanted to.
As far as you knew, as far as who from the group were you aware of?
I don't really remember the responses. I don't think I knew for sure if anybody was going to come, except Brian Higgins said he would come by.
You left around.
Yes.
Had Brian Higgins been to your house before?
I believe he was at my house for a high school graduation party.
High school graduation, probably in the spring, is that correct?
It would have been the summer prior to that time. So my twins were graduating high school, and we had something at the house, and it was spring, summer of the year prior.
And around that time, so that would have been 2021, is that correct?
Yes.
So around that time, there was still messages or whatever of the COVID pandemic, is that correct?
Yes, actually, that was just getting over, I think.
And so where was this graduation party at your house? Was that inside your house or outside your house or something?
It was actually out back. It was more of a cookout type thing.
As far as you can recall, prior to January 28, 2000, had Mr. Higgins been physically inside your house for anything beyond using the bathroom?
Besides that graduation party, I don't believe he had ever been at my house. I'm sure he walked into the house to use the bathroom or something that day, but I didn't really notice.
We call ourselves Boricua, a unique name honoring the vibrant spirit of our people. When you experience our island, you'll find that spirit in your live, Boricua.
Left the house?
Yes.
And nobody else arrived at the house?
Your sister-in-law, Jennifer McCabe, Matthew McCabe, at some point, did they come by?
Yes, I thought you were referring to after they showed up.
So when, my question is, do you know whether or not when Jennifer McCabe and Matthew McCabe arrived, was Colin still there?
I don't know if he was still there or not. I believe he left before they came, but I'm not 100%.
So you come home and you go to use the restroom, is that correct?
Yes.
When you go to use the restroom, Colin's there, correct?
Yes.
And the McCabe's are not?
They are not.
When you come back from the restroom, Colin's not there?
Yes, Colin was gone.
And the McCabe's are there?
No, I don't believe they had arrived yet.
So they arrived sometime after Colin had left.
Yes.
Over the course of that evening of the 28th into the early morning of the 29th, did anybody else come into your house, or did anybody else come into your house at any point?
No.
In addition to yourself, your wife, and your son, did you have any pets at that time?
Yeah, yes, we did.
What kind of pets did you have?
We had a dog.
What kind of dog was that?
So it was a German Shepherd mix,
What was the name of the dog?
Chloe.
And how long had you and your family had them?
We had Chloe for approximately, at that time, maybe 6 or 7 years.
Do you recall how you got the dog or where you got it?
The dog was from a shelter in Dallas, Texas, actually.
Essentially a rescue dog, is that correct?
Yes, rescue dog.
When you got home after you
At some point, I went upstairs to grab the dog and let her out back to use the bathroom.
So when you would take the dog out, or when anybody would take the dog out to use the bathroom, how would that be accomplished? So what I'm asking is, would the dog be on a leash, or would it be let out in the yard?
No, so the backyard's fenced in, so I would open up the back door and she can go out, use the bathroom, and come back inside.
The entirety of your backyard, that's a fenced-in backyard, is that correct?
Yes.
Beyond that fence, as far as the abutting, what sort of abuts the back of your?
Behind the back fence, there's a railroad track. I believe it's a commuter rail that's behind the fence.
And is there any sort of opening or way to get into any wooded area between your house and the tracks?
Yes, there's a gate back there.
The gate, as far as when you let the dog out in the back that night, did you stay with the dog while the dog was outside?
I stayed at the doorway when the dog went to the bathroom and then ran right back in.
So about how long was the dog outside?
She was out back for maybe 2 or 3 minutes.
Went outside, went to the bathroom, came back. When the dog came back inside the house, where did the dog go?
So the dog walked around in the kitchen for a few minutes and then I took her upstairs.
And when you took her upstairs, where upstairs?
The dog liked to sleep in our room, mine and my wife's room. A lot of times she would go up there on her own. Sometimes I would walk her up and I walked her up to our bedroom.
And at any point in time for the remainder of that evening or the early morning?
No.
You mentioned that there are tracks that run close to your property, is that correct?
Yes.
Is that just the commuter rail, or does the Acela go by, or anything else?
I believe there is, in addition to the commuter rail, there's other trains that use that track, yes.
How often, daily basis, do
It depends on schedule-wise, if it's the middle of the week or if it's the weekend. But on any given day, they can go by 5 or 6 times, morning, more towards the rush hour times, morning, at night, and then sometimes at night and sometimes during the day. Really all day and night.
when the trains go by, about how loud is it?
It's loud, although having lived there for a period of time, I feel like at least I'm immune to the sound. I don't really hear it as much anymore.
So something essentially based on how long you've lived there, you really don't even hear it anymore?
Not really, no.
You let the dog out, you bring the dog back upstairs, and then where did you go?
So after I brought the dog up, I just came back down and hung out with everybody else.
Where within your house?
So everybody was in the kitchen, and then we have a connecting dining room, but it's opened. It's only a difference of 5 feet. And then we have the family room den that's adjacent to the kitchen, but they're all close proximity.
The kitchen and the dining room are the same room, is that correct?
Yes.
As far as what if anything is between the kitchen and dining room and the living room?
So there's a wall, but there's a doorway. So there's really no barrier to go from the kitchen dining room into the family room.
So if somebody's standing in the family room and somebody's standing in the kitchen dining area, they can sort of see each other?
Yes.
In the kitchen area where everybody was, or in the kitchen dining room area, do you recall where people were and what they were doing around that time?
Yeah, I think people were just sitting around having drinks. Someone had a speaker and they were listening to music and just talking and hanging out.
As far as the sort of group, sort of the overall mood or demeanor of the group back at the house, how would you?
Pleasant, fun. Everybody was having a good time. We were wishing Brian a happy birthday and everything was going great.
At any point in time while this was all going on, did you, other than your situation with the dog, was there any point in time where you were not with the group in the kitchen dining area?
No, I was there basically for the whole night, except I think at one point I may have shown Brian Higgins some photos that were in my son's room that were upstairs. My son, Jack, who's one of the twins, was in the Marines or is in the Marines. We had put some plaques and some stuff in his room upstairs. Brian Higgins was prior military, as am I. And I thought he would want to see the photos, so I had him look at them.
And that period of time that you were outside of the kitchen dining room, Higgins, about
very quickly, 2 minutes, maybe 3 minutes.
Now, at some point over the course of that morning, things started to.
Yes.
About what time was that things started to wind down? People started.
I think Brian left at around 1:30. I believe he was the first to leave, and then others left after that.
You say others left after that. After Mr. Higgins left your house, where did you?
So after Brian left, I had gone upstairs and hung out and watched TV up in my bedroom.
Had a long day that.
Yes, I had the funeral in New York that morning. We had the long drive back, and we had been out, and now we're hanging out at my house, and it had been a long day. Yes.
So at any point in time, after you went upstairs, after Mr. Higgins left, upstairs at all?
Yes, I think I popped back down at one point just to see how long people were going to be there, and then went back up.
When you popped back down, how many people were?
I think Jen and Matt was still there, and the two Brian's two friends were still there, my daughter Caitlin.
As far as beyond Mr. Higgins, was there any other occasion that you can recall where somebody from your house went outside and then came back?
Yes. So while we were hanging out, I believe the girl Julie Nagel's brother came to the house. I never saw him, but I could hear them saying that he was out front. And I think Julie Nagel had walked outside to talk to him.
At some point after she walked outside, she came back inside, is that correct?
Yes.
About how long a period of time, if you know, was she outside?
I didn't really pay attention to how long it was. I don't think it was that long.
As far as the outside of your house, after you had let Chloe out and back in, what, if any, observations did you make outside of your house? Did you look out? Did you see anything outside of the house?
Just that we have windows in the back of the kitchen area. You could just see that it was snowing.
Is that sort of like a bay window in the kitchen?
Yes, it's a large bay window in the kitchen.
When you look out the bay window in the kitchen, what part of your property does that face?
It's the backyard. You can see the backyard. The bulkhead is right under that bay window, and you can pretty much have a view of the whole backyard if it's in the daytime, but it was obviously a little dark.
See the front of the house at any part of the front of the house when you're looking out the bay window?
No.
But any point in time over the course of the evening, did you look out front to see anything out in front of your house?
No.
At any point in time over the course of the evening, did you hear anything from front of the house, the back of the house, anywhere around the house that drew your attention outside?
No.
At any point in time during the evening, did you know or did you become aware of either John O'Keefe or the defendant Karen Read coming over to your house? At no point in time over the course of that evening or the early morning there, did John O'Keefe or Karen Read physically come into your house?
John O'Keefe and Karen Read never entered my house.
So you go up to bed and the group is still downstairs, is that correct?
Yes.
At some point, your wife Nicole, you share a bedroom with, did she come upstairs?
Yes.
Do you know about what time that was?
It was probably 2-ish. Not exactly sure, but around 2 or 2 o'clock.
The doors to your house is, as far as the front doors and the back doors, what is the situation with regard to locking the doors before everybody goes to bed?
Rephrase that.
Sure. You lived at 34 Fairview Road. There were a number of doors to the house, including 2 doors in the front, correct?
Yes.
How is that? Let me ask you this. Would it be unusual for the front doors of your house to remain unlocked?
No.
Is that something that happened on occasion where people were supposed to lock the doors? But
Yes, from time to time, the doors, people would just forget to lock them, or we just didn't lock them.
So your wife comes up to your bedroom about 2 a.m. or so. As far as you knew, was everybody else had left the house at that point?
Yes.
You're up for a period of time with your wife, is that correct?
Yes.
Over the course of that time, so following 2 o'clock in the morning, do you recall any sort of phone call or phone conversation with Mr. Higgins or anybody else?
No,
At some point you fall asleep, do you recall about when that was?
I don't, but it was obviously after 2 because that's when she came upstairs. We watched TV and hung out together for a while and then went to sleep.
The dog, Chloe, was she up in the room where you were?
Yes.
Was there overnight, is that correct?
Yes.
Turning your attention to later on that morning, beginning of that morning, daytime morning, January 20th. Obviously, at some point you wake up, correct?
Yes.
What is it that wakes you up on that morning?
I was awoken that morning to my sister-in-law, Jen, had burst into my room.
Do you know about what time that was?
It was early in the morning, between 6 and 6:30, I would say.
Fair to say that's not a...
No.
When she burst into your room, can you describe her demeanor or how she appeared when she first...
She was very upset, almost hysterical.
What, if anything, did she say when she came into the...
She said something to the effect, John is dead.
Objection.
Next question, please.
Did you know who she was referring to when she initially comes in?
I initially did not.
And at some point during the course of that conversation, does Ms. McCabe make reference to going down?
Yes.
Prior to that, not the content of the conversation, but as far as the length of the conversation. About how long was that length of the conversation that occurred in your bedroom between yourself, Ms. McCabe, and your wife?
Probably a minute.
The demeanor that you described as far as Ms. McCabe was concerned is almost hysterical. Was that continuous throughout that initial conversation?
Yes. She was very upset.
If anyone did she indicate was downstairs, or why did you go downstairs?
She said that the police,
This I'm going to allow.
Go ahead.
she said that the police were downstairs.
So you went downstairs to talk to the...
Yes.
When you go downstairs, what do you see when you get to the bottom?
I saw a Canton police officer downstairs.
So inside your house?
Yes.
The door to your house, was it still open or shut or something?
I don't remember.
The Canton police officer that's inside your home, did you recognize him?
Yes.
Who did you recognize?
The last name, Lank. So Officer Lank.
Was he someone that you were familiar with?
I knew who he was, yes.
Did you socialize or were you friends or anything like that?
I didn't socialize with him. I knew him to be a Canton police officer. I had met him, multiple times, and I knew him to know my brother Chris.
So knew him is essentially what I'm asking. Knew him in a professional capacity, personal capacity.
No, of course they were welcome in my house.
Where did you go with the officers in your house? Where did you spoke with the officer? I'm presuming.
Yes, we spoke in the kitchen area.
And when you're speaking with the officer in the kitchen area, who is there?
So my wife, Nicole, her sister, Jen, and I believe Jen's husband, Matt, arrived almost the same time that I came downstairs, maybe a minute after.
And how long a period of time was this conversation that occurred in the kitchen?
I don't remember the exact time. I wouldn't want to guess. I don't remember. He was 10, 15, 20 minutes maybe initially.
When you say initially, was there a subsequent conversation that occurred after that?
Yes, Officer Lank returned to the house sometime after that.
When he returned sometime after that, was he alone or
I believe that time he was with Lieutenant Gallagher, perhaps.
were you familiar with Lieutenant Gallagher prior to that morning?
I knew who Lieutenant Gallagher was on a professional level. I had not hung out with him on a social level.
And again, they were welcomed into your home and you spoke with them, is that correct?
Yes, the second time they were there, they were invited back to the house via a phone call.
The conversation within your house, where did that,
Same area, family room, kitchen area.
if you know about how long the conversation was that second, come back to the house?
That may have been longer, maybe a half hour.
Going back to that initial conversation, as far as, so it's yourself, it's Mr. and Mrs. McCabe, your wife, and then the police, is that correct?
Myself, my wife, Nicole, my sister-in-law, Jen, her husband, Matt, had arrived, and the police, yes.
In between that first speaking with the police and the second time that the police came back to your house, if anyone did you call or notify in regard to the situation that was going on in front of you?
I called Brian Higgins
Why did you call?
because I think it was important for him to know what was going on and what had happened.
As far as you knew with reference to Mr. O'Keefe and Ms. Reed, what, if any, relationship, friendship, anything were you aware of between Mr. Higgins and either Mr. O'Keefe or Ms.
I was not aware too much about a relationship with Brian and either person. Brian had mentioned maybe even that night that he was friendly and knew John. I knew of no relationship between Brian and the defendant.
Following your conversation with Mr. Higgins, if anyone else came up,
Brian Higgins eventually came over to my house, and my sister-in-law, Julie, also arrived at my house.
do you know why your sister-in-law Julie came by here?
Yes.
Why?
She has a routine that when it's someone's birthday, she likes to come by and bring coffee and donuts. So it was Brian's birthday that night. So my sister-in-law, Julie, was coming by to drop off some donuts and coffee, I think.
Where was Julie? I saw her.
She was out front in the driveway.
What, if anything, did you ask Julie to do when you saw her out?
I asked her to come inside.
When she came inside, is that when you informed her of what had happened?
Yes, I don't know if it was necessarily me that informed her, but people that were there were explaining to her what happened. It was a very chaotic, unbelievably chaotic morning.
As far as when that was described to your sister-in-law, Julie, how would you describe her demeanor or her reaction to the news regarding Mr. O'Keefe?
Shock. That's how I would describe it. Everybody's reaction that morning was utter shock. She was upset and looked very in shock.
So the second time that the Canton police officers come back to your home, who was there at that point?
I know I was there for sure. My wife, Nicole, Jen, her husband, Matt. Brian Higgins may have been there at that time. And I'm not sure about Julie. Julie at one point left the house, and I think she came back later in the morning. So I'm not sure if she was there.
At some point when your sister-in-law, Julie, came back to your house, who, if anyone, came to your house?
Her husband, my brother Chris, who's her husband.
Was this before or after the second time that the police had been at your house?
I believe they came back after the second time, but I'm not 100% sure. The first time that Julie came with the coffee, the police were not there.
When you first get up and come downstairs and the police they're basically in your doorway, is that correct?
Yes.
Could you see outside as far as what was going on outside at that time?
Not from downstairs, but I had looked out the window after Jen had come up into my room and explained what had happened and before I went downstairs.
When you looked out your window from your bed, what did you see?
I could see at least one police vehicle I could see that there was something going on out front, and that was about it. I just went straight downstairs.
At that time that you looked out your window, either an
I
ambulance.
don't remember if I saw an ambulance. There were emergency vehicles out there, but I can't remember exactly which types.
And at any point in time, at that time or subsequent throughout the course of the day, did you go out to that area of your yard where you saw the cruisers and the sort of lights?
No,
And why?
I didn't see that there was a reason to go out to that area. The police had already been in my house. They had already talked to us about what was going on. It was a snowstorm at that point. They were trying to conduct an investigation, and I didn't want to interfere with it or have anything to do with it.
As far as what you're learning when Jennifer McCabe first comes surging into your bedroom at 6 to 6:30 in the morning, at any point around there were you made aware of where John O'Keefe was at that point?
Yes,
What were you made aware?
I was made aware that he was taken to the hospital.
By the time that you're awoken by Mrs. McCabe, John O'Keefe is, to your knowledge, not outside.
To my knowledge, I believed he was on the way to the hospital.
Later on in the course of that day, at some point, did you have occasion to speak with some troopers from the state police?
Yes,
If you recall, who is it that you spoke with?
I spoke with Trooper, last name Proctor, and then another trooper, and I don't know the last name, first name Yuri.
Would it be Sergeant?
It could be.
Had you met either of those troopers prior to that date?
I had never met Trooper Proctor. I had met Trooper, I forget, what is the last name?
You met Trooper
Yuri. I had met him once or twice before.
Was that in a professional capacity?
Yes,
Where did you speak with him on that?
at my sister-in-law Jen's house.
If you recall, about what time of day was it that you spoke with him?
It was late morning, early afternoon, the day of the incident. So I don't know the exact time. Before noon, I think.
Why was it?
My sister-in-law Jen and her husband Matt were leaving my house. My sister-in-law was distraught. I wanted to be comforting to them and be there for them if they needed anything. I drove to their house.
This is, and speaking of your sister-in-law, Jennifer, this is someone you've known since she was how old?
7 years old. She's like a little sister to me.
At the point that you're going over to the house, did you know that there were going to be troopers from the state police over at the house?
Yes,
And fair to say they asked to talk to you, is that correct?
yes.
Who, if anyone else, they spoke to at your sister-in-law's house that day?
I believe they spoke with Jen, my sister-in-law Jen, and then her husband Matt, and then myself.
So was that done in a group setting or was it separate or something?
Separate.
So they spoke to you in one area of the house while Jennifer and Matthew McCabe were in another area of the house and vice versa for you?
Yes, I spoke with them at the dining room table, and Jen and Matt were not present. I believe they may have been upstairs or somewhere else in the house.
Where were you when the troopers were talking to either Jennifer McCabe or?
I was upstairs when they were being spoken to.
I may have one moment, Joan.
Yes.
I'm going to show you a series of 8 photographs of necessary. What I've just presented you with been previously marked as exhibits 58 through 65, and generally speaking, do you recognize what's depicted in those photographs?
Yes,
What do you recognize?
the photos appear to be the front yard in front of my old house at 34 Fairview Road.
From those photographs, do they appear to be a fair and accurate portrayal of what your house and your yard looked like around that time? Is that correct?
Yes,
Your Honor, with court's permission, I would ask to publish those for the jury to discuss with the witness briefly. Mr. Albert, sir, there should be on the desk in front of you a laser pointer. Actually, we already talked.
I have that, yes.
What's up on the screen currently? Do you recognize, is that what's depicted in exhibit?
Yes, this looks like the photo exhibit 58 that you handed me.
This is a photograph of your house, sort of, if I'm standing on the street to the left side of the property, correct?
Yes.
On this left side of your property, let me ask you this first. As far as between the roadway of Fairview Road and your front lawn, is there anything there as far as a sidewalk or anything like that?
No, there's no sidewalk, so the grass area goes right to the curb, and then there's the street.
The curb that's in between the grass and the roadway, is that like a straight curb, a straight edge curb, granite curbing, or like rounded curbing? How would you describe that?
I would just describe it as a regular curbing. It's not granite. The color is black, so it seems like a tar curbing.
In this area of the left side of your property, what if anything of notice in that area of the property?
Well, in that area of the property, first of all, that's basically the property line from the neighbor's house. If you're staring at my house from the front, the neighbor to the left, that's the property line area. But there's a fire hydrant there. There is a flagpole with the American flag and the Marine Corps flag. There is we call it like an electrical box, but I'm not sure what the purpose of it is.
So for all the years that you've lived there, I really don't know what that electric.
I don't know if it's operable. Sometimes the door is open. If it's windy, the door of the box blows open, and sometimes it's closed, and we don't really have much to do with it.
The general area where you saw police vehicles, do you see that in this photograph?
Yes, that's the same general area.
The same general area as you were describing with the fire hydrant.
Yes.
Ms. Gilman, if I could have the next exhibit 59. Again, sir, what's up on the screen? Is that what you have before you?
What was it, 59? Yes.
From this photograph, sir, this is again a picture of your residence around the time of January 29th, correct?
Yes.
Fair to say this is taken after some of the snow has melted from the storm before.
Yes, it appears that there's less snow in the front there.
So less snow than what you saw when you looked out your window or at some later point.
Yes.
From this photograph, if you could just direct the jury's attention to the driveway and the garages, and where is that located?
My driveway was this area right here, and that's the garage doors.
From within this photograph as well, you mentioned that there were sort of two doors to the front of your house, one that leads into a foyer area and the other that leads into a living room of some kind. If you could direct the jury's attention to where each of those doors would be on that.
Sure. So the door right here is we consider it the front door. That goes into a foyer area. And not from this photo, you can't really see it, but there's a door in this breezeway area, and that opens up into the family room.
One last thing from this photograph, sir, if the window, that window in this photograph as well.
Yes, I believe it would be this one right here in the corner.
If I could have the next exhibit number 6.
You say 60?
60. So what's up on the screen? Do you recognize that as what you have before you as exhibit 60?
Yes.
And from this photograph, as far as the roadway and the sort of width of the road from the curb to the line there, is that generally what it was on January 29th? That's what the roadway looked like?
The morning of the 29th?
The morning of the 29th, it was snow, correct?
So the roadway, I believe, would have had some snow on it.
What I'm asking is, when you came home that evening or the early morning of it, is that essentially what the roadway looked like, absent whatever the snow was covering?
Yes.
The next photograph, Ms. Gillen? Again, now looking at what is exhibit 61, is that correct?
Yes.
This is essentially a closer up image of the area of the fire hydrant and electrical box and the flagpole that you were talking about before.
Yes.
Ms. Gillen, if I could have the next photograph. Screen, this would be, and I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. Is this 62?
60 appears to be, yes. 60.
So you were mentioning earlier in your testimony that the area where you saw the police cruisers when you looked out your window in the morning of the 29th was near where your property abuts the neighboring property, correct?
Yes.
And do you happen to know what number that next door neighbor's house is, up or down from 30?
I honestly don't. I don't know what number that is.
Do you see the property line in between your house and the next door neighbor?
Yes, I believe that row of trees is the property line.
There's,
Yes, they appear to be in line from almost the street to the white fence.
and that white fence in the back right of that fence that you were talking about before, that's your backyard.
Yes.
The next photograph is coming up. Again, this is just another photograph of sort of that area of your yard. Is that correct?
1 second. Sorry. Yes.
Reference to this area of the yard at your house when you were living there at 34 Fairview Road, is that an area of the yard that would be of particular use, or did you go in that area of the yard all that much?
No, we didn't really use that area too often. There's a large wood chip bed. You can't see it because of the snow, but it covers that area, so we don't really go over that often.
So with reference to area of the yard, was there any sort of overhead, like ambient lighting, street lights, anything like that?
No, so that's a very dark part of the yard. There's no street light there at all.
The next photograph, Ms. Gilman, Mr. Albert, I believe this would be number 4, is that correct?
Yes.
With reference to this, can you describe to the jury, what are we looking at in this particular photograph?
That's the front right door, I guess you could say, to the house. And again, you can't see the door, but it's inside that breezeway area to the left.
If you could, just use them.
Oh, yeah. So the door would be right in here.
From the driveway leading up to that front door area you were talking about with the foyer once you get in, what, if anything, is leading you up to the steps there?
To the other door,
To the other,
there's a brick walkway.
so brick walkway leading up the brick steps into the foyer area of your house.
Yes.
The last in this set, Ms. Gilman, Mr. Albert, this would be number 5. Do you recognize what's depicted in this photograph, sir?
Yes.
What do you recognize?
So that's the picture of the ground in front of the fire hydrant, which is to the left front of my yard.
Mr. Albert, with the days that sort of followed from January 29th, as far as your home was concerned, was what, if any, sort of police presence did you observe or notice in that area in the front yard of your home?
So over the course of the next couple of days, there were emergency vehicles and police personnel that day and days following in front of the house.
So later on in the afternoon of the 29th and continuing on for days after, is that correct?
Yes.
And what, if anything, did you observe as far as the weather was between the date of the 29th and the days that the police presence was outside of your house?
I believe it rained a few times during that time.
As far as the snow that had been piled up on your front lawn, what, if anything, was occurring with the snow as the days went on following the 29th?
I believe so. Some of the snow was shoveled out, I believe, during the crime scene. And then some of the snow was just dissipating due to the fact that it was melting and it had rained a bunch of days.
Sir, if I could draw attention to your house, and obviously at some point you moved from the house on Fairview in Canton to Norwood, correct?
Yes.
When was that first discussed between you and your wife as far as selling the house?
That was discussed in October, November of, it would have been 2021.
What was it that sort of precipitated that discussion as far as selling your house?
Around that time, and it was post-COVID, the housing market seemed really good. And my brother, Chris, had sold his house, was in the process and ultimately sold his house around that time. He got a great deal on it. I had known some other people that had sold around that time. It was a little early for us because our children weren't all necessarily gone yet, but it was close and we thought we could get a good deal for the house. So that's when we started exploring it. So he put me in touch with a realtor that ultimately sold his house.
At some point you sold the house?
I did. So we didn't end up selling until April of 3.
As far as prior to selling the house, what, if any, did the sale of your house have anything to do with what occurred there on January 29th, 2022?
Absolutely not.
Nothing further for this witness, Your Honor.